She was broken, returning from her mother's funeral on a red-eye flight. He was a stranger who became her pillow. She woke up to a note from a tech millionaire, but their chance meeting was anything but chance.
You looked like you needed rest. If you ever need peace or a fresh start, call me.
Christopher Wren had seen her grief-stricken photo in a newspaper and booked that exact flight to find her. What started as calculated compassion ignited into something real.
You knew who I was before you sat down? You planned this whole thing.
I saw your photo with your dying mother. I had to meet you.
A connection born from deception. A heart learning to heal and trust again. Can their love survive the truth about how it began? Or will his manipulation destroy the only thing that made her whole? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of dirt hitting the mahogany casket. Nia Delaney stood motionless, her dark eyes fixed on her mother's final resting place. At 28, she never thought she'd be saying goodbye to the woman who had been her rock, her compass, her everything. The service was beautiful, said Mrs. Jenkins, her mother's best friend and fellow teacher at Oakwood Elementary. Diane would have loved it. Nia nodded, unable to form words. Her throat felt like it was filled with the same dirt now covering her mother's casket. A few feet away, her sister Vanessa stood with her husband, already checking her watch. At 34, Vanessa had always been the practical one, while Nia had inherited their mother's sensitive heart. "We should get going," Vanessa said, approaching Nia. "There's still the house to deal with, and I can only stay until tomorrow." "I'll be there later," Nia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need some time alone." Vanessa's lips tightened. "Always in your own world, aren't you, even now?" The words stung, but Nia didn't have the energy to fight. This was how it had been since their father left 15 years ago. Vanessa stepping into the role of the responsible one, criticizing Nia's every move. "I'll see you at Mum's house," Nia said. After everyone left, Nia knelt beside the fresh grave. "I'm sorry, Mum," she whispered. "I should have come home more. I should have been here when you got sick." Tears streamed down her face. "How am I supposed to do this without you?" The Delaney home buzzed with conversation as neighbors and friends brought casseroles and shared memories of Diane Delaney, the beloved third-grade teacher who had touched countless lives in their small Georgia town. Nia moved through the rooms like a ghost, accepting condolences with tight smiles that never reached her eyes. She escaped to her childhood bedroom, where boxes of her mother's belongings waited to be sorted. A knock on the door broke her trance. "You can't hide up here all day," Vanessa said, entering without waiting for a response. "People are asking for you." "I just needed a minute," Nia replied. Vanessa sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "We need to talk about the house, Nia. I think we should sell it." Nia's head snapped up. "What? No, this is Mom's home." "Was Mom's home," Vanessa corrected. "And she left it to both of us. I have a family in Chicago. I can't keep flying back and forth to deal with an empty house." "It's not just a house, Vanessa. It's everything we have left of her. Things aren't people, Nia. Mom is gone, and holding onto this house won't bring her back." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Nia turned away, unable to look at her sister. "My flight leaves tomorrow," Vanessa continued, softer now. "I need to know what you're planning to do. Are you going back to your job in San Francisco or staying here?" Nia had been avoiding this question. Her job as a librarian at a small community college in San Francisco wasn't particularly demanding, but it was hers. She'd built a quiet life there, away from the shadows of her childhood. "I don't know yet," she answered honestly. Vanessa stood, straightening her black dress. "Well, you need to decide. The property taxes are due next month, and there's the mortgage." Mom didn't leave much in savings. After her sister left, Nia pulled out her phone and checked her flight details. Her red-eye back to San Francisco was scheduled for tonight. She'd booked it thinking she couldn't bear to stay in this house any longer than necessary, but now the thought of leaving made her chest tighten. Atlanta International Airport hummed with activity despite the late hour. Nia wheeled her small suitcase through the terminal, her free hand clutching her mother's worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. She hadn't been able to leave it behind. At the gate, she checked her boarding pass. Seat 14A, window seat. At least she could lean against it and try to sleep during the 5-hour flight. Sleep had been elusive since her mother's diagnosis 3 months ago, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd gotten more than a few hours at a stretch. Boarding was called, and Nia found herself shuffling down the aisle of the dimly lit aircraft. Most passengers were already settling in for the overnight journey, adjusting neck pillows and pulling down eye masks. Nia reached row 14 and found a man already seated in 14B. He glanced up briefly as she approached, offering a polite nod before returning to his book. Nia slid into her seat, grateful that he didn't seem interested in conversation. As the plane began its taxi down the runway, Nia stared out the window at the lights of Atlanta, the city where she'd grown up, where her mother had lived and died. A wave of grief hit her suddenly, and she gripped the armrests, trying to steady her breathing. The man beside her shifted slightly but said nothing. The plane took off, climbing steeply into the night sky. Nia closed her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Not here, not surrounded by strangers. The exhaustion of the past week washed over her, and she felt herself drifting despite her best efforts to stay awake. Her head lolled to the side, coming to rest on something warm and solid, her neighbor's shoulder. She knew she should straighten up, apologize, but the darkness was already pulling her under. Nia woke with a start as the plane hit a patch of turbulence. Disoriented, she blinked in the dim cabin, trying to get her bearings. The seat next to her was empty. She frowned, wondering if she'd dreamed the man in 14B. The flight attendant's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into San Francisco. Local time is 4:45 a.m., and the temperature is a cool 52 degrees. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Nia sat up straighter, running a hand through her curly hair. Her book had fallen to the floor. As she reached down to retrieve it, she noticed the pages had fallen open, and something was tucked between them, a folded piece of paper. Curious, she opened it and read, "You looked like you needed rest more than anything. I'm glad I could help. If you're ever in need of something else, peace, conversation, or a fresh start, call me. CM." Below the message was a phone number, and attached with a small paper clip was a boarding pass stub that read, "Christopher M. Wren, First Class." Nia stared at the note, trying to remember the man's face, but all she could recall was a vague impression of someone tall with kind eyes. She felt a strange flutter in her stomach. Who leaves a note for a sleeping stranger? As the plane touched down in San Francisco, Nia carefully tucked the note back into her book. She had more important things to worry about than mysterious passengers. Her grief couldn't be solved by a phone call to a stranger, no matter how thoughtful his gesture. Nia's apartment felt colder and emptier than she remembered. The small one-bedroom in the Sunset District had always been her sanctuary, filled with books and the quiet life she'd built for herself. Now it felt like just another place she didn't belong. She dropped her suitcase by the door and moved to the kitchen on autopilot, filling the kettle for tea. As she waited for the water to boil, she pulled out her phone and saw 3 missed calls from Vanessa. With a sigh, she called her sister back. "Finally," Vanessa answered. "I've been trying to reach you." "I was on a plane, Van." "Well, I'm back in Chicago now. I've contacted a realtor about the house. She thinks we could list it by the end of the month." Nia gripped the counter. "I told you I'm not ready to sell." "And what's your plan exactly?" "To let it sit empty while you're in California. To quit your job and move back to a town where there's nothing for you." "There's everything for me there," Nia argued. "Mom's memory, her garden, her debts," Vanessa interrupted. "Her medical bills. The reality you keep avoiding." Nia closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "I need more time." "Time doesn't pay bills, Nia. I need you to be practical for once in your life. We'll split the proceeds from the sale. You can use your half to pay off your student loans." After they hung up, Nia felt hollow. She pulled out her mother's book, and the note fell out again. She stared at it, at the neat handwriting and the simple offer of, what exactly? Comfort from a stranger. For 3 days, Nia went through the motions of her life. She returned to work at the library, shelving books and helping students, all while feeling like she was watching herself from a distance. At night, she'd take out the note, read it, then put it away again, telling herself it was ridiculous to even consider calling. On the 4th night, after a particularly difficult phone call with Vanessa about emptying their mother's house, Nia found herself reaching for her phone. Before she could talk herself out of it, she typed a simple message to the number on the note. "This is Nia Delaney, seat 14A. Thank you for the note, and for being a good pillow." She hit send before she could change her mind, then immediately regretted it. What was she doing texting a complete stranger? She set her phone down, certain she wouldn't get a reply anyway. To her surprise, her phone buzzed less than a minute later. "Nia, I'm glad you reached out. I was hoping you would. How are you doing?" "Chris." Such a simple question, but it hit her hard. How was she doing? terrible, lost, broken, but she couldn't say that to a stranger. "I'm okay. Just got back to work. It's been an adjustment." His reply came quickly. "I'm sure okay is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. If you don't mind me asking, what brought you to Atlanta?" Nia hesitated, then decided there was no harm in telling the truth. "My mother's funeral." There was a longer pause before his next message. "I'm so sorry for your loss. No wonder you were exhausted. I lost my father 2 years ago. It changes you." Something about his simple acknowledgement broke through Nia's carefully constructed walls. Before she knew it, she was typing again. Everyone keeps talking about practical things. The house, bills, moving on. But I can't even breathe sometimes. "The world doesn't stop for grief," he wrote back. "But that doesn't mean you have to keep pace with it. Give yourself permission to move at your own speed." Their conversation continued late into the night. Nia found herself sharing things she hadn't told anyone. About her complicated relationship with Vanessa, about her guilt for not being there when her mother first got sick, about the emptiness she felt returning to San Francisco. Chris's responses were thoughtful and never pushy. He shared bits of his own life too, his work in tech that left him feeling disconnected, his empty house in the hills that never quite felt like home, his own grief over his father. By the time Nia finally fell asleep, it was nearly 3 a.m., and they had exchanged dozens of messages. The last one from Chris read, "Sometimes the kindest people we meet are strangers on planes, but I'd like to not be a stranger anymore. Would you have coffee with me this weekend?" Nia had answered with a simple, "Yes." Saturday morning found Nia sitting at a small table outside a cafe in Noe Valley, nervously checking her watch. She'd arrived 15 minutes early, second-guessing her decision with each passing minute. What did she really know about this man? That he was kind enough to let a grieving woman sleep on his shoulder, that he wrote thoughtful text messages, that he had somehow made her feel understood in a way no one else had since her mother died. She was about to lose her nerve when a tall figure approached her table. Looking up, Nia finally saw the face of Christopher M. Wren, clearly for the first time. He was handsome in an understated way, with dark brown hair that curled slightly at the ends and warm hazel eyes behind simple glasses. He wore jeans and a light blue button-down shirt, casual but clearly expensive. He smiled when their eyes met, and Nia felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Nia?" he asked, his voice deeper than she'd imagined. She nodded, suddenly shy. "It's good to finally meet you," he said, sitting down across from her. "Properly, I mean." "Thank you for the note," she said, finding her voice. "It was unexpected." Chris smiled again, and there was something in his expression that put her at ease. "I almost didn't leave it. Wasn't sure if it would seem strange." "It did," Nia admitted with a small smile of her own, "but in a good way." A waitress came to take their order, and when she left, Chris leaned forward slightly. "How are you really doing today?" The simple question asked with such genuine concern caught Nia off guard. She'd spent so long giving polite, sanitized answers to that question. "Not great," she answered honestly. "My sister wants to sell our family home. Everything is happening too fast." Chris nodded, listening intently. "And you're not ready to let it go." "It's not just a house," Nia explained, surprising herself with her openness. "It's where my mom taught me to read, where she planted her garden every spring. It's all I have left of her." "I understand," Chris said softly. "After my father died, I couldn't bring myself to clean out his study for months. Everyone thought I was being impractical, but some things can't be rushed." Their coffee arrived, and the conversation flowed more easily than Nia could have imagined. Chris told her about his work developing educational software, how he'd started his company from his garage and sold it 2 years ago for millions. "Now I consult occasionally, but mostly I'm trying to figure out what's next," he explained. "Success doesn't feel like much when you don't have anyone to share it with." "Is that why you were in Atlanta?" Nia asked. "For business?" A flicker of something, hesitation, crossed his face. "Partly," he answered. "I was also visiting my father's sister. She's the only family I have left." As the morning stretched into afternoon, Nia realized she hadn't thought about her grief or her problems with Vanessa for hours. There was something about Chris that made her feel present, anchored in a way she hadn't since before her mother got sick. When they finally parted ways outside the cafe, Chris asked, "Would you like to have dinner next week? I know a quiet place with great food and no pressure." Nia hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that." He smiled, and for the first time in weeks, Nia felt a small spark of hope. As she watched him walk away, she couldn't help wondering if meeting Christopher Wren had been just a coincidence or something more. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Called the realtor again. She wants to list the house next week. Need your signature on the papers. The brief moment of peace shattered, and reality came rushing back. Nia closed her eyes, feeling torn between the life she'd left behind and whatever this new connection might become. Little did she know that Christopher M. Wren was harboring a secret of his own, one that would soon test this fragile new beginning. The restaurant was tucked away on a quiet street in Pacific Heights, its entrance marked only by a small bronze plaque that read Maison. Nia checked the address on her phone again, making sure she was in the right place. When Chris had suggested dinner, she'd imagined a casual cafe like where they'd had coffee, not what was clearly an exclusive establishment. She smoothed down her simple black dress, suddenly feeling underdressed. Before she could reconsider, the door opened and Chris stepped out smiling when he saw her. "You found it," he said, looking genuinely pleased. "Not the easiest place to spot." "I almost didn't," Nia admitted. "It's very discreet." Chris laughed softly. "That's part of its charm. The owner is an old friend who believes the best experiences shouldn't announce themselves." He held the door open, and Nia stepped into a warm, intimate space with just 8 tables, each separated from the others by strategically placed plants and screens. The lighting was soft, casting a golden glow over everything. "Mr. Wren," the host greeted them with a respectful nod, "your table is ready." They were led to a corner table with a view of a small courtyard garden. As they sat, Nia noticed there were no menus. "They serve whatever's fresh today," Chris explained, seeing her confusion. "Trust me, it's always exceptional." A waiter appeared with 2 glasses of champagne. "Compliments of Chef Antoine," he said before disappearing again. Nia took a small sip, the bubbles dancing on her tongue. It was unlike any champagne she'd ever tasted, not that she'd had much experience with expensive brands on a librarian's salary. "This is lovely," she said, "but a bit more formal than I expected." Chris looked momentarily uncomfortable. "I should have warned you. I can be oblivious sometimes about how things might appear. We can go somewhere else if you'd prefer." "No, it's fine," Nia assured him, touched by his concern. "It's just very different from my usual takeout in front of Netflix." He smiled, visibly relaxing. "Mine too, honestly. Despite what this place might suggest, I'm not really comfortable in the world of fine dining and social events. I'd rather be home with a good book most nights." "What are you reading now?" Nia asked, grateful for the shift to more familiar territory. Their conversation flowed easily from books to music to their favorite places in San Francisco. Chris listened intently when Nia spoke about her work at the library, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. There was no hint of condescension, despite the obvious difference in their financial situations. The food arrived without announcement, a parade of small, exquisite dishes that the waiter described in hushed tones. Nia had never tasted anything like it, but she found herself more captivated by Chris's company than the culinary experience. "Tell me about your mother," Chris said during a pause between courses. "You mentioned she was a teacher." Nia nodded, surprised by how the question didn't immediately bring the usual stab of pain. "3rd grade, at the same elementary school for over 30 years. She loved it. Said 8-year-olds were the perfect age, still full of wonder but starting to think critically." "She sounds remarkable," Chris said softly. "She was." Nia smiled, remembering she could get through to any child, no matter how troubled or difficult. Parents would specifically request her class for kids who were struggling. "That kind of impact lasts generations," Chris observed. "I had a teacher like that in 5th grade, Mr. Harmon. He's the reason I got into educational software." "Really?" Chris nodded. "I was this awkward, too smart kid who didn't fit in anywhere. He recognized that I was bored, not difficult, and challenged me differently than the others. When I started my company, creating adaptive learning programs was my focus. Tools that could recognize different learning styles and adapt, like a good teacher does instinctively." Nia found herself studying his face as he spoke, struck by the passion in his voice. There was a depth to Christopher Wren that hadn't been immediately apparent. "That's beautiful," she said simply. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them. A recognition, a connection that went beyond their brief acquaintance. The moment was interrupted by Nia's phone, buzzing insistently in her purse. She ignored it, but when it buzzed again immediately, she apologized and checked the screen. 5 missed calls from Vanessa. "I'm sorry," she said, anxiety creeping into her voice. "It's my sister. I should call her back." Chris nodded, understanding. "Of course. Take your time." Nia stepped outside the restaurant to return Vanessa's call, bracing herself. "Finally," Vanessa answered, her voice tight with irritation. Where are you? Out to dinner, Nia replied. What's wrong? What's wrong is that I've been trying to reach you all day. The realtor needs an answer. She has a potential buyer who wants to see the house this weekend. Nia closed her eyes, feeling the familiar tension returning. I told you I'm not ready to sell. And I told you we don't have a choice, Vanessa snapped. The property taxes are due and there's the second mortgage Mom took out for her medical bills. Did you know about that? Nia hadn't known. How much? Enough that we can't afford to keep the house, even if we wanted to, which I don't. My life is in Chicago and you're in California. Be realistic, Nia. The conversation continued in the same vein, with Vanessa pushing and Nia resisting. Finally, Nia agreed to fly back to Atlanta that weekend, to go through the house and talk to the realtor in person. When she returned to the table, her good mood had evaporated. Chris looked at her with concern. Bad news? He asked gently. Nia nodded, not trusting her voice immediately. After taking a sip of water, she explained the situation with the house and her sister's ultimatum. I need to fly back to Atlanta this weekend, she concluded. I can't keep avoiding it. I understand, Chris said. He hesitated, then added, Would you like company? Nia stared at him, startled by the offer. You'd fly to Atlanta with me? If it would help, he said simply. Sometimes having a neutral third party can make difficult family situations easier. Or I could just be there for moral support. No pressure either way. His offer was so unexpected, so generous, that Nia didn't know how to respond. They'd known each other for less than 2 weeks. Yet something about his presence made her feel grounded in a way she desperately needed. I couldn't ask you to do that, she said finally. You didn't ask. I offered, he pointed out with a gentle smile. Think about it. The offer stands. Back in her apartment that night, Nia couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the evening with Chris, his unexpected offer, and the looming confrontation with Vanessa. Around midnight, her phone lit up with a text from Chris. I meant what I said. Sometimes it's easier not to face difficult things alone. Whatever you decide about this weekend, I'm here. Nia stared at the message, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Chris's kindness was a lifeline she desperately wanted to grasp, but she barely knew him. Yet in their brief time together, he'd shown more understanding of her grief than people she'd known for years. Before she could overthink it, she typed back, If you're serious about coming to Atlanta, I'd appreciate the company. But I should warn you, it won't be a fun trip. His response came quickly. I'll book the flights, and Nia, it's not about fun. It's about being there for someone who matters. Someone who matters. The words echoed in her mind as she finally drifted off to sleep. When had she started to matter to Christopher Wren? The flight to Atlanta was nothing like their first meeting. This time, Chris had booked them both first-class seats, despite Nia's protests. And there was no accidental shoulder-leaning or mysterious notes. Instead, they sat side by side, talking quietly about books and movies, deliberately avoiding the difficult weekend ahead. Have you been back since the funeral? Chris asked as they began their descent. Nia shook her head. No, part of me has been avoiding it. That's understandable, he said. Going back makes it more real. Exactly, she agreed, grateful for his insight. As long as the house is still there with all her things in it, it's like a piece of her is still here too. They rented a car at the airport, and Nia gave directions to her childhood home in the small suburb outside Atlanta. As they drove through familiar streets, Nia felt a tightening in her chest. Every corner held memories: the park where her mother had taught her to ride a bike, the ice cream shop they'd visit after good report cards, the library where she'd first discovered her love of books. When they pulled up to the modest 2-story house with its wraparound porch and overgrown garden, Nia had to take a deep breath before getting out of the car. It's a beautiful home, Chris said quietly beside her. It was, Nia agreed, noting the peeling paint and uncut grass. Her mother's illness had taken priority over home maintenance in the final months. Vanessa's rental car was already in the driveway. Nia braced herself as she unlocked the front door, Chris a reassuring presence behind her. The house smelled musty from being closed up, but underneath was the familiar scent of her mother's lavender sachets and the lemon oil she used on the wooden furniture. Nia paused in the entryway, overwhelmed by memories. Nia, is that you? Vanessa called from the kitchen. Yes, Nia answered, moving forward. I brought someone with me. Vanessa appeared in the kitchen doorway, eyebrows rising in surprise at the sight of Chris. She was dressed in her usual practical style, dark jeans and a crisp button-down, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. This is Christopher Wren, Nia introduced. Chris, this is my sister Vanessa. Chris stepped forward, offering his hand. It's nice to meet you, Vanessa. I'm sorry for your loss. Vanessa shook his hand, her expression guarded. Thank you. Are you a friend of Nia's from California? We met recently, Chris explained smoothly. When Nia mentioned she was coming back to deal with family matters, I offered to accompany her. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. How thoughtful, she said, her tone suggesting she found it anything but. She turned to Nia. The realtor will be here in an hour. I've already started boxing up the kitchen. Nia looked past her sister to see cardboard boxes stacked on the counter, filled with her mother's cherished dishes and cookware. You started without me? She asked, hurt evident in her voice. Someone had to, Vanessa replied. We only have the weekend. Chris placed a gentle hand on Nia's shoulder. Why don't I make us all some coffee? I'm sure you two have a lot to discuss. Vanessa looked like she wanted to object to a stranger, making himself at home in their mother's kitchen, but after a moment, she nodded curtly. Fine, coffee would be good. As Chris busied himself finding cups and filters, Vanessa pulled Nia into the living room. Who is this guy, really? She asked in a low voice. You've known him for what, a few days? And now he's flying across the country with you? It's not like that, Nia defended. He's just being kind. Men like that aren't just kind, Nia. What does he want? Not everyone has ulterior motives, Van. Vanessa sighed, running a hand over her face. Look, I don't have the energy to worry about your love life right now. We have more important things to deal with. The bank called yesterday. Mum was 3 months behind on the mortgage. The news hit Nia hard. Why didn't she tell us? Because she was Diane Delaney, who never wanted to worry her daughters, Vanessa said, a rare note of emotion cracking her practical facade. The point is, we need to sell, now, before they start foreclosure proceedings. Nia sank onto the sofa, feeling the fight drain out of her. She'd come prepared to argue for keeping the house, but this changed everything. I had no idea it was this bad, she admitted. I know, Vanessa said, her tone softening slightly. She hid it well, even from me. In the kitchen, they could hear Chris moving around, the domestic sounds a strange counterpoint to their difficult conversation. He seems nice, Vanessa offered after a moment, an olive branch of sorts. He is, Nia said simply. More than nice. He understands what this feels like. Before Vanessa could respond, there was a knock at the door, the realtor arriving early. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, discussions about listing prices, and the realtor's enthusiastic description of how they could stage the house to appeal to young families. Nia signed where she was told to sign, feeling as if she were betraying her mother with each stroke of the pen. Chris remained a quiet, supportive presence, occasionally asking insightful questions about the process, but mostly just being there for Nia. His calm demeanor seemed to impress even Vanessa, who gradually relaxed her suspicious attitude toward him. After the realtor left, promising to bring potential buyers the next day, the three of them stood in the living room, surrounded by the accumulation of Diane Delaney's life. We need to decide what to keep and what to... Vanessa couldn't quite bring herself to say throw away about their mother's belongings. I'll help however I can, Chris offered. Or I can make myself scarce if you'd prefer to do this privately. Actually, Nia said, I could use a break. Would you mind if we went for a walk? I'd like to show you the neighborhood. Vanessa looked like she wanted to object, but instead nodded. Fine, I'll keep working here. The donation truck is coming tomorrow afternoon. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. Nia led Chris down the sidewalk, past houses where she'd trick-or-treated as a child and played kickball in the summer. Thank you for being here, she said, after they'd walked in comfortable silence for a while. It's even harder than I expected. You're doing fine, he assured her. Grief isn't linear. Some moments will be easier than others. They reached a small park at the end of the street, and Nia led him to a bench overlooking a duck pond. My mum used to bring me here every Sunday after church, she said, sitting down. We'd feed the ducks and talk about books. It was our special time. Chris sat beside her, close but not touching. She sounds like an amazing mother. She was. Nia smiled sadly. She worked so hard to give us a good life after my dad left. I never realized how much she struggled financially. I wish I'd helped more. I'm sure she was proud of you, Chris said gently. Building your own life, following your passion for books and learning. Nia turned to look at him, struck again by how easily he seemed to understand her. How do you do that? Do what? Say exactly the right thing. It's like you know me better than people I've known for years. Something flickered in his eyes. Discomfort, guilt. But it was gone so quickly, Nia thought she might have imagined it. Sometimes it's easier for outsiders to see clearly, he said after a moment. We don't have the history that complicates things. They sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks glide across the water. The simple peace of the moment was a balm to Nia's raw emotions. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. Why are you really here? You barely know me. This isn't your problem to solve. Chris was quiet for so long that Nia wondered if he would answer. When he did, his voice was low and sincere. When you fell asleep on my shoulder on that plane, it was the first time in years that someone needed me for something real. Not for my money or my connections or what I could do for their business. Just needed me as a person. He looked at her directly. Do you know how rare that is? Nia felt something shift between them. A deepening. A recognition of mutual need and understanding. I should probably tell you, Chris continued. I'm not just some random guy who happened to be in seat 14B. Well, in certain circles I'm known. My company, Wren Educational Technologies, was acquired by Google 2 years ago. The press made a big deal of it. Oh, Nia said, trying to process this information. So you're wealthy, he finished for her. Yes, uncomfortably so sometimes. It changes how people see you, how they interact with you. That's why that moment on the plane meant something to me. You had no idea who I was. You just needed someone, and I happened to be there. Nia nodded slowly, understanding better now his earlier discomfort at the restaurant and his easy offer to fly across the country with her. Thank you for telling me, she said, but it doesn't change anything for me. Money isn't what I need right now. I know, he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. That's why I'm here. As they walked back to the house, their hands brushed once, twice, and then Chris gently took her hand in his. It was a small gesture, but in that moment it felt like an anchor in Nia's stormy sea of grief and uncertainty. Back at the house, they found Vanessa surrounded by photo albums in the living room, her usual composed expression replaced by one of unexpected vulnerability. Look at this, she said as they entered, holding up a photo of their mother as a young woman, standing proudly in front of her first classroom. I'd forgotten how beautiful she was. Nia sat beside her sister, and for the first time since the funeral, they began to share memories without tension or argument. Chris excused himself to make dinner from the groceries they'd picked up earlier, leaving the sisters to their reminiscence. Hours later, after a simple but delicious meal, Vanessa surprised Nia by suggesting that Chris stay in their mother's guest room rather than at a hotel. It makes more sense, she said with a shrug when Nia raised her eyebrows. And I think Mom would have liked him. It was as close to an approval as Vanessa was likely to give, and Nia felt a rush of gratitude toward her usually critical sister. That night, as Nia lay in her childhood bedroom surrounded by the books and mementos of her youth, she found herself thinking not about what she was losing, but about what might be beginning. Christopher Wren had entered her life at her lowest moment and somehow made her feel hopeful again. What she didn't know was that across the hall, Chris was sitting on the edge of the guest bed, staring at his phone and the article he'd saved weeks ago, a local news piece about the beloved teacher Diane Delaney and her 2 daughters, with a photo of Nia standing beside her mother's hospital bed, her face a mask of grief that had moved something deep inside him. The truth was, Christopher M. Wren had recognized Nia the moment she sat down in seat 14A, and soon she would discover this secret that could destroy the fragile trust growing between them. The weekend in Atlanta passed in a blur of difficult decisions and emotional goodbyes. By Sunday evening, Nia and Vanessa had sorted through most of their mother's belongings, dividing keepsakes between them and donating the rest. The realtor had brought 3 potential buyers through the house, and one couple had already expressed serious interest. I think we got a lot accomplished, Vanessa said as they sat on the porch swing Sunday night, sharing the last bottle of their mother's favorite wine. Chris had tactfully made himself scarce, claiming he needed to handle some work emails. I still can't believe we're selling it, Nia said softly, looking at the familiar outline of the house against the darkening sky. Vanessa sighed, an uncharacteristic gentleness in her expression. I know, but Mom would understand. She never wanted us to be burdened. Nia nodded, surprised by this moment of connection with her sister. Do you remember how she used to sit out here during thunderstorms? She loved watching the lightning. And she'd make us hot chocolate no matter how warm it was outside, Vanessa added with a small smile. Said it was tradition. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the creaking of the swing a familiar, comforting sound. Your friend Chris, Vanessa said suddenly. He's not what I expected. What do you mean? I don't know. When you said you were bringing someone, I thought... She shrugged. I guess I thought he'd be more hipster librarian, less whatever he is. Nia laughed, despite herself. Tech millionaire, apparently. Vanessa's eyebrows shot up. Seriously, he told me yesterday. His company was bought by Google. Wow. Vanessa looked impressed, despite herself. And he's interested in you? It's not about money, Van. I know that, her sister said, surprising Nia. I've seen how he looks at you like you're something precious. She took another sip of wine. Mom would have liked him. Coming from Vanessa, this was high praise indeed. Nia felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the wine. I like him too, she admitted quietly. More than I expected to. Just be careful, okay? Vanessa said, but without her usual judgment. You're still vulnerable. Don't rush into anything, says the woman who got engaged after 3 months, Nia teased. And look how well that turned out, Vanessa replied with a self-deprecating smile, referring to her divorce 2 years earlier. The sisterly moment was interrupted by the sound of the screen door opening. Chris stepped out onto the porch looking apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, he said. I just wanted to check if either of you needed anything from the kitchen. I'm making tea. We're fine, thanks, Vanessa answered. Then added, actually, I should pack early flight tomorrow. She stood, giving Nia's shoulder a squeeze before heading inside. Chris took her place on the swing, careful to maintain a respectful distance from Nia. The evening air was cool now, carrying the scent of the jasmine that grew along the porch railing. How are you holding up? He asked. Nia considered the question. Better than I expected, actually. It still hurts, but I don't know. There's something about going through her things, remembering her life. It helps. Memory is how we keep people with us, Chris said. My father used to say that no one is truly gone as long as someone remembers them. That's beautiful. Nia looked at him curiously. You talk about your father often, but you rarely mention your mother. A shadow crossed Chris's face. She left when I was 7. Decided family life wasn't for her. I'm sorry, Nia said, understanding better now his earlier comment about people needing him for real things. He shrugged. It was a long time ago. My father did his best. He was everything to me. His voice caught slightly on the words. Without thinking, Nia reached for his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. They sat like that for a while, the swing moving gently, both lost in memories of parents now gone. Thank you for coming with me, Nia said finally. I couldn't have faced this alone. You're stronger than you think, Chris replied, but I'm glad I could help. The moment felt significant, balanced on the edge of something more. Nia found herself studying his profile in the dim porch light, wondering what it would be like to kiss him. As if reading her thoughts, Chris turned to face her. His eyes dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes, a question in his gaze. Nia answered by leaning forward slightly, and then his lips were on hers, gentle, tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she moved closer, deepening the kiss. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she felt the careful restraint in his touch, the respect in his gentleness. When they finally broke apart, Nia felt slightly breathless, as if she'd been running. Chris looked equally affected, his eyes wide and bright in the darkness. I've wanted to do that since the coffee shop, he admitted with a small smile. Me too, Nia confessed, but I wasn't sure if it was just gratitude or something more. And now? Now I'm sure it's something more. The kiss should have simplified things, but as they flew back to San Francisco the next day, Nia felt a new kind of uncertainty. What exactly was happening between them? How could she build something new when she was still sorting through the pieces of her old life? Chris seemed to sense her conflicted thoughts. No pressure, he said quietly, as their plane began its descent. We can take this as slow as you need. His understanding only made Nia care for him more. By the time he dropped her off at her apartment, they had made plans to have dinner at his place the following weekend. I'll cook, he'd said with a boyish smile. Fair warning, I only know how to make about 3 things well. I'm sure it will be perfect, Nia had replied, and meant it. The next few weeks passed in a haze of new romance and continued grief. Nia would go from crying over an old photo of her mother to laughing at one of Chris's stories an hour later. The emotional whiplash was exhausting, but also healing in its way. Chris never tried to rush her through her sadness or pretend it wasn't there. He simply offered his presence, his understanding, and increasingly his heart. Their dinners became a regular occurrence, alternating between his spectacular hillside home, which he'd made cozier and less imposing with books and comfortable furniture, and her tiny apartment, which he seemed to genuinely prefer. It feels lived in, he explained when she apologized for the cramped space. My place is still just a house. This is a home. On a rainy Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after their return from Atlanta, Naya was curled up on her sofa, grading papers from the community college literature class she taught part-time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Offer on the house. Full asking price, closing in 30 days, call me. Nia stared at the message, feeling the familiar mix of grief and relief. It was really happening. Her childhood home would belong to someone else. She called Vanessa, and they talked through the details. The conversation was easier than it would have been before their weekend together. There was a new understanding between them, a bridge beginning to form over the chasm of their different approaches to life. After hanging up, Nia felt the need to share the news with Chris. It was becoming second nature to turn to him in both good moments and bad. House is sold, feeling strange about it. Too late to call. His response came immediately. Never too late, want me to come over? 20 minutes later, he was at her door with a pint of her favorite ice cream and a patient ear. They sat at her kitchen table as she talked through her complicated feelings about the sale. I know it's the right decision, she concluded, but it feels like another goodbye. It is, Chris agreed, but you're not losing your memories of the place, or of your mother. I know. Nia smiled at him gratefully. How did you get so wise about grief? Something flickered in his expression, that same hesitation she'd noticed before. Experience, I guess, he said after a moment, and I've been seeing a therapist since my father died. It helps. I should probably do that, Nia admitted. I've been thinking about it. I can recommend someone if you'd like, Chris offered. No pressure, though. Nia reached across the table to take his hand. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done these past weeks without you. Chris squeezed her hand but looked troubled. Nia, there's something I need to tell you. That sounds ominous, she said, trying to keep her tone light despite the sudden tightness in her chest. It's not, at least I hope it's not. He took a deep breath. It's about how we met. On the plane? Nia asked, confused. Chris shook his head. Before that. Well, not met exactly, but he ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. I knew who you were before you sat down in seat 14A. Nia withdrew her hand, a cold feeling spreading through her. What do you mean? There was an article, he explained, pulling out his phone, about your mother. He pulled up the article and handed her the phone. Nia stared at the screen. It was from the local Atlanta newspaper's website. Beloved teacher's final lesson in courage. Diane Delaney's battle with cancer inspires community. Below the headline was a photo of Nia standing beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her hand. Nia remembered the day clearly. A local reporter had come to do a story on her mother's teaching legacy. The article had been published just 2 weeks before her mother died. I don't understand, Nia said, looking up at Chris. How did you see this? Why would you even be reading an Atlanta newspaper? I have a news alert set up for stories about exceptional teachers, Chris explained. For my foundation, we give grants to innovative educators. Your mother's story came across my feed. He hesitated before continuing. The article mentioned you would be flying back to San Francisco after the funeral. I changed my flight to be on the same one. Nia stood up abruptly, needing distance. You deliberately booked a seat next to mine? You planned the whole thing? No, Chris protested. I just booked the same flight. The seat assignment was coincidence, I swear. I didn't even know if I would talk to you. I was moved by the story, by the photo. You looked so, I don't know, there was something in your face that I recognized. That same grief I felt when my father was dying. So what was the plan? Nia demanded, anger rising to cover her hurt. Comfort the grieving daughter. Make yourself feel better by playing the hero? It wasn't like that, Chris insisted, standing as well but keeping the table between them. I didn't have a plan. When you sat down next to me, I was going to introduce myself, tell you about the article, maybe just offer condolences, but then you fell asleep, and it seemed cruel to wake you just to satisfy my own conscience. So you left a note instead, Nia said flatly, with your phone number, very selfless. Chris flinched at her tone. I'm not explaining this well. I never expected you to call or text. I couldn't let you wake up alone after seeing how exhausted you were. The note was just in case you needed someone to talk to, someone who might understand what you were going through. But you didn't tell me the truth, Nia pointed out, her voice rising. You let me believe it was all coincidence. This magical connection between strangers on a plane. For weeks, Chris, weeks of getting to know each other, of me trusting you with my grief, my family, my... She stopped, unable to say heart, though the word hung in the air between them. I should have told you sooner, Chris admitted. I wanted to so many times, but the longer I waited, the harder it got. I was afraid of exactly this reaction, afraid of losing you. You didn't have me to lose, Nia shot back, even as a voice in her head whispered that it wasn't true. She had been falling for him, opening herself to the possibility of something real. I'm sorry, Chris said, his voice raw with regret. I never meant to hurt you or deceive you. The connection between us, that's real, Nia, at least it is for me. Nia crossed her arms over her chest, trying to hold herself together. I need you to leave. Nia, please. Now, Chris, I need to think. I can't do that with you here. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead nodded slowly. I understand. For what it's worth, everything else I've shared with you has been real. Every conversation, every moment. I've never been more honest with anyone than I've been with you. Except about how we met, Nia pointed out bitterly. Except about that, he agreed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He moved toward the door but paused with his hand on the knob. I'll give you space, but I'm not giving up on us, Nia. What we have is too important. After he left, Nia sank onto the sofa, her mind replaying every interaction they'd had since that night on the plane. Had it all been calculated? His understanding of her grief, his offer to accompany her to Atlanta, his patience and kindness, was it all part of some savior complex? A rich man's attempt to feel something real by inserting himself into her tragedy? But even as these doubts plagued her, she couldn't ignore the genuine connection they'd formed, the way he listened when she spoke, the vulnerability he'd shown when talking about his own father, the respect he'd always shown for her independence. Confused and exhausted, Nia finally fell into a restless sleep on the sofa, the rain pattering against her windows like the universe's own tears. The next morning, Nia woke with a stiff neck and a heavy heart. She called in sick to work, unable to face the day with her emotions in such turmoil. As she made coffee, her phone buzzed with a text from Chris. I know you need space, and I respect that. I just want you to know that meeting you has been the most meaningful thing to happen to me in years. Whether it started with coincidence or intention doesn't change what's grown between us. When you're ready to talk, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Nia set the phone down without responding. Part of her wanted to forgive him immediately, to acknowledge that his intentions had been good, even if his actions were misguided. Another part felt deeply betrayed, as if the foundation of their relationship had been built on sand. She spent the day alternating between anger and confusion, between missing him and resenting him. By evening, she needed a friendly ear. She called her colleague and friend, Jade, and asked if she could come over. Jade's apartment was a cluttered, colorful space that reflected its owner's vibrant personality. As they sat on floor cushions with mugs of herbal tea, Nia explained the situation. Let me get this straight, Jade said when Nia finished. This gorgeous, kind, wealthy man saw a photo of you during the worst moment of your life, felt a connection, and then fate put you in the seat next to his. You've spent weeks getting to know each other. He's been nothing but supportive, and he finally confessed to seeing your photo before meeting you. She raised an eyebrow. And this is a problem because, put that way, it did sound somewhat ridiculous. But Nia shook her head. It's the deception, Jade. He let me believe it was all chance. He had weeks to tell me the truth. And what would you have done if he'd told you right away? Jade challenged. If a stranger on a plane had said, hey, I saw your photo in an article about your dying mother, so I booked this flight hoping to meet you, you would have thought he was a stalker and run screaming. Nia couldn't deny this. But he should have told me later, once we started getting to know each other. Maybe, Jade conceded, but it sounds like he was afraid of losing you. And from what you've told me about him, this guy doesn't have a lot of real connections in his life. She tilted her head, studying Nia. The question is, does his omission outweigh everything else you feel for him? It was a good question and one Nia wasn't sure how to answer. I don't know, she admitted. I feel like I can't trust my own judgment anymore. What if the whole relationship has been him trying to rescue the sad girl from the photo? Has he tried to rescue you? Jade asked. Or has he just been there for you, supporting your decisions? Nia thought about it. Chris had offered help, but never pushed it on her. He'd accompanied her to Atlanta at her request, had respected her boundaries, had consistently treated her as an equal, despite their different circumstances. He's never tried to fix my problems, she acknowledged. Just been there while I faced them. That doesn't sound like a savior complex to me, Jade observed. It sounds like someone who cares about you. Nia sipped her tea, considering her friend's words. I still feel hurt. Of course you do, Jade agreed. And you have every right to those feelings. Take the time you need, but don't throw away something potentially beautiful because its beginning wasn't what you thought it was. After leaving Jade's apartment, Nia walked along the waterfront, watching the fog roll in over the bay. The city lights twinkled through the mist, beautiful and mysterious. Like relationships, she thought, never completely clear, always partially obscured, requiring faith to navigate. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Got the paperwork for the house. Need your signature. Also, have you talked to Chris? He called me. Nia stopped walking, surprised. He called you? When? Why? This morning. Wanted to know if there was anything he could do to help with the house sale. Also mentioned he'd messed up with you. Seemed pretty torn up about it. Nia didn't know how to feel about Chris reaching out to her sister. On one hand, it seemed like another overreach. On the other, it showed he genuinely cared about the things that mattered to her. We're taking some space, she texted back. Vanessa's response came quickly. Your call, but for what it's worth, I think he really cares about you. Not many men would fly across the country to help pack up a dead woman's house. Coming from Vanessa, this was practically a ringing endorsement. Nia put her phone away and continued walking, her thoughts as misty as the air around her. By the time she reached her apartment, she'd made a decision. She wouldn't call Chris yet. She still needed time to process her feelings, but she wouldn't shut the door on the relationship either. What had grown between them over the past weeks felt too important to dismiss because of how it began. As she unlocked her door, she noticed a small package leaning against it. No note, just her name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a book, a first edition of Pride and Prejudice, similar to her mother's beloved copy, but in much better condition. Tucked inside the cover was a simple card. Sometimes the best stories have unconventional beginnings. I'm sorry for mine. See. Nia held the book to her chest, tears welling in her eyes. The gesture was perfectly him, thoughtful, connected to what mattered to her, not flashy despite what must have been a considerable expense for a first edition. She still wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but as she placed the book carefully on her shelf, she felt the first stirrings of what might be understanding. People made mistakes. Intentions mattered, and perhaps, just perhaps, a relationship that began with a deception could still grow into something honest and true. What Nia didn't know as she fell asleep that night was that Chris was sitting in his empty hillside home, staring at a photo on his phone. Not the newspaper article that had brought them together, but a picture he'd taken of Nia on the porch swing of her mother's house, her face lit by the setting sun, looking peaceful for the first time since he'd met her. He would give her the space she needed, but he wouldn't give up hope. Some connections were too rare, too precious to let slip away. And Christopher Wren had never been one to walk away from something that mattered, no matter how difficult the path might be. A week passed, then two. Nia threw herself into her work at the library, staying late to organize community events and taking on extra shifts teaching literature classes. The busier she stayed, the less time she had to think about Christopher Wren and the ache his absence had left in her life. But at night, alone in her apartment, the memories would come flooding back. His gentle smile, the way he listened as if her words were precious, the feeling of safety she'd found in his arms. She would pick up the first edition of Pride and Prejudice he'd given her, running her fingers over its leather cover, wondering if, like Elizabeth Bennet, she had judged too harshly and too quickly. She hadn't contacted him since that night. He had respected her request for space, sending only one text a few days after their argument. Thinking of you. Still here when you're ready. No pressure. See. Vanessa called every few days with updates about the house sale. The closing was scheduled for the end of the month, and Nia would need to fly back to Atlanta to sign the final papers and remove the last of their personal belongings. Are you coming alone? Vanessa asked during one such call, her tone carefully neutral. Yes, Nia replied, knowing what her sister was really asking. Chris and I aren't. We're still taking space. Have you talked to him at all? No, Vanessa sighed. Look, Nia, I'm not usually the one pushing for romantic reconciliations, but are you sure you're not overreacting? So he saw an article about Mom before meeting you. Is that really such a betrayal? It's not that simple, Nia argued, though she'd been asking herself the same question lately. He let me believe our meeting was coincidence. He had so many opportunities to tell me the truth. And would you have given him a chance if he had? Vanessa challenged. Or would you have shut down immediately, convinced he had some weird agenda? Nia didn't answer, which was answer enough. Just think about it, her sister continued, softer now. We both know how rare it is to find someone who really gets you. Don't throw that away because the beginning wasn't what you thought it was. After hanging up, Naya stood by her window, watching the fog roll in over the San Francisco hills. Her sister's words echoed those of her friend Jade. Was she being too rigid, too unforgiving? Or was she protecting herself from someone who had started their relationship with a lie? The next day at the library, Nia was shelving books in the classics section when she came across a battered copy of Jane Eyre. She pulled it from the shelf, remembering how she and Chris had once spent an entire dinner debating whether Rochester was a romantic hero or a manipulative villain. He kept secrets from Jane, Nia had argued, huge, life-altering secrets. But he loved her for her mind, her spirit, Chris had countered. In an age when women were valued mainly for beauty or status, he saw the real her. Still doesn't excuse the lying, Nia had insisted. Chris had smiled that thoughtful smile of his. No, it doesn't, but it makes him human, complex. The question is whether his love and his recognition of her true worth outweigh his deception. The memory hit Nia with unexpected force. Had she been asking herself the wrong question all along? Not whether Chris had deceived her. He had by omission, if not by direct lie, but whether that deception negated everything else that had grown between them. She replaced the book on the shelf, her hands trembling slightly. She still wasn't ready to reach out to him, but for the first time since their argument, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that their story wasn't over. The day before her flight to Atlanta, Nia received a large envelope in the mail. Inside were the final papers for the house sale and a brief note from Vanessa. Everything's set for tomorrow. The buyers are a young couple with 2 kids. The wife is a teacher too. Mom would have liked that. The note brought unexpected tears to Nia's eyes. There was something fitting about her mother's home going to another teacher, another family that would fill it with love and learning. Maybe Vanessa had been right all along. Selling the house didn't mean erasing their memories. As Nia packed that evening, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Delaney, this is Maria Jenkins, your mother's colleague. Your sister gave me your number. I wanted to let you know we're planning a small dedication ceremony at the school tomorrow. We're naming the library after your mother. I hope you can attend. Nia quickly responded that she would be there, a bittersweet warmth spreading through her chest. Her mother's legacy would live on not in a house but in the minds and hearts of the students she had taught. As she zipped her suitcase, her eyes fell on the first edition book Chris had given her. After a moment's hesitation, she packed it too. She wasn't sure why, perhaps as a reminder of what might have been, or perhaps because a part of her wasn't ready to leave it behind. Atlanta greeted Nia with a warm spring rain, the air heavy with the scent of magnolias and wet pavement. She rented a car at the airport and drove directly to her mother's house, soon to be someone else's home. Vanessa was already there, sorting through the last few boxes in the living room. The house was mostly empty now, the furniture sold or donated, the walls bare of family photos. You made it, Vanessa said, giving Nia a quick hug. How was the flight? Fine, Nia replied, looking around at the empty space. It's so strange seeing it like this. I know, Vanessa squeezed her shoulder, but it's time. They spent the afternoon going through the remaining items, deciding what to keep and what to let go. By evening, they had narrowed it down to 2 small boxes each, the distilled essence of their childhood home packed away in cardboard. The dedication at Mom's school is tomorrow at 10, Nia mentioned as they sat on the floor eating takeout Chinese food. Mrs. Jenkins texted me about it. I know, Vanessa said. I've been helping them organize it. It was supposed to be a surprise for you, but I should have known Maria wouldn't be able to keep a secret. Nia smiled, touched by her sister's involvement. Thank you, Van, that means a lot. Vanessa shrugged, but Nia could see she was pleased. It's what Mum deserved. The principal wants us both to say a few words. Nothing fancy, just memories of her as a teacher. I'd like that, Nia said, surprised at how the idea didn't fill her with dread as it might have a month ago. The sharp edges of her grief were softening, becoming something she could carry without being cut by it. They slept in their old bedrooms that night, on air mattresses Vanessa had bought for the occasion. As Nia lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar creaks of the house, she found herself reaching for her phone. Before she could overthink it, she typed a message to Chris. They're naming the library at Mom's school after her tomorrow. She would have been so honored. Just wanted to share that with you. She hit send, then set the phone aside, not expecting a response at this late hour. To her surprise, it buzzed almost immediately. That's beautiful, Nia. A perfect tribute for someone who loved books and learning. She lives on through all the students she inspired. Through you, too. The simple message brought tears to Nia's eyes. Even after weeks of silence, Chris still knew exactly what to say, exactly how to recognize what mattered to her. "Thank you," she wrote back, "for understanding." "Always," came his reply. Nia fell asleep with the phone still in her hand, feeling as if something tight in her chest had finally begun to loosen. Oakwood Elementary School hadn't changed much since Nia had been a student there. The same brick building, the same playground equipment, the same flagpole where she had once accidentally torn her dress during a third-grade presentation. What was different was the sign over the library entrance, now covered with a cloth that would soon be removed to reveal her mother's name. Nia stood in the hallway, overwhelmed by memories and by the turnout for the ceremony. The corridor was filled with current and former students, parents, and teachers, all there to honor Diane Delaney. "There you are," Vanessa said, appearing at her side in a simple blue dress that their mother would have loved. "Principal Garvey is looking for us. We're starting in 10 minutes. Nia followed her sister through the crowd, accepting hugs and condolences from people who had known her mother. They were led to seats in the front row, facing a podium set up outside the library doors. Principal Garvey, a tall woman with silver hair and kind eyes, welcomed everyone and spoke about Diane's decades of service to the school and the countless lives she had touched. Former students shared stories of how Mrs. Delaney had helped them overcome reading difficulties or sparked their love of learning. As Nia listened, her heart full of pride and sorrow, a movement at the back of the crowd caught her eye. Someone tall was slipping in through the side entrance, trying not to draw attention. Chris. Nia's breath caught in her throat. What was he doing here? How had he even known where to come? She watched as he took a position at the back of the room, his eyes finding hers across the crowd. He gave a small, uncertain smile, but made no move to approach her. Before she could process his presence, Principal Garvey was inviting her and Vanessa to speak. Vanessa went first, sharing polished, heartfelt memories of their mother as both a parent and educator. When it was Nia's turn, she approached the podium on shaky legs, her prepared remarks suddenly inadequate. "My mother believed that books were magic," she began, her voice stronger than she expected. "Not just because they could transport you to other worlds, but because they could help you understand your own. She used to say that every book you read becomes a part of who you are, changing you in ways both small and profound." As she spoke, Nia found herself looking not at the crowd but at Chris, standing quietly at the back, listening with that intense focus she had come to cherish. What made my mother special as a teacher wasn't just her knowledge or her methods, though both were exceptional. It was her ability to see each student as they truly were, to recognize their unique gifts and challenges, and to meet them exactly where they needed her to be. Nia paused, suddenly understanding something important. She never tried to make her students fit some predetermined mold. Instead, she adapted herself to what they needed, becoming the teacher, the person who could help them grow into their best selves. Tears pricked at Nia's eyes as she continued. "This library being named after her is the perfect tribute, because like the books inside it, my mother's influence lives on in everyone she taught, everyone she loved, including me." She looked directly at Chris as she finished. "Thank you all for being here, for remembering her, for carrying her legacy forward in your own lives." The applause was warm and genuine. As Nia returned to her seat, Vanessa squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of a job well done. The ceremony continued with the unveiling of the plaque bearing Diane Delaney's name and a ribbon cutting for the newly renamed library. Afterward, as people mingled and shared refreshments, Nia found herself searching the crowd for Chris. Had he left already? Had he come all this way just to witness the ceremony and then disappear again? "He's in the library," Vanessa said beside her, following her gaze. "Go talk to him." "You knew he was coming?" Nia asked, surprised. Vanessa shrugged. "He called me yesterday, asked if it would be inappropriate for him to attend. I told him it was up to him." She gave Nia a gentle push. "Go on. You two have things to figure out." Nia made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and kind words, but moving steadily toward the library doors. Inside, the space was quiet and empty, except for one person, Chris, standing by a display of children's books, studying them with genuine interest. He looked up as she entered, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Nia, your speech was beautiful." "Thank you," she said, moving closer but still maintaining some distance between them. "What are you doing here, Chris?" "I wanted to understand," he said simply, "who your mother was, what she meant to this community. I wanted to see the place that shaped you." He gestured to the bookshelves around them. "This makes sense now. Your love of books, your desire to help others discover them. You're her daughter in more ways than just blood. The observation was so accurate, so insightful, that Nia felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. How did you even know about the ceremony, she asked. I've been in touch with Vanessa, he admitted. Not about you, I respected your need for space, but I wanted to help with the house sale if I could, make sure you both got a fair deal. When she mentioned the dedication, He trailed off, looking embarrassed. I booked a flight immediately. I probably should have asked if you'd be okay with me being here. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid you'd say no, he said honestly. And I needed to be here. Not to try to win you back or pressure you in any way, but because this matters to you, so it matters to me. I wanted to see the place your mother loved, meet the people whose lives she touched. He paused. I wanted to understand your world, Nia. Not to change it or save you from it, but to be part of it, if you'll let me. His words echoed her own thoughts during her speech, about her mother meeting students where they were. Chris wasn't trying to rescue her or reshape her life to fit his. He wanted to understand her roots, her foundation. You flew across the country just for this, she asked, though she already knew the answer. I would have flown around the world, he said simply. You're worth it, Nia. What we had, what we could have, it's worth it. Nia felt the last of her resistance melting away. I've missed you, she admitted, the words coming easier than she expected. These past weeks I kept thinking of things I wanted to tell you, share with you. I've missed you too, Chris said, taking a cautious step toward her. More than I can say. I'm still hurt that you didn't tell me the truth from the beginning, Nia said, needing to be honest. I know, and I'm sorry. If I could do it over again, I would have told you as soon as we started getting close. His eyes were earnest, his regret palpable. But I can't change how we began, Nia. All I can do is promise honesty from here forward, if you're willing to give us another chance. Nia studied his face, the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. Why did that article affect you so much? There must be thousands of stories about teachers out there. Chris was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The photo of you with your mother, the way you were looking at her, it reminded me of how I felt sitting by my father's hospital bed. There was so much love there and so much pain. He shook his head slightly. I don't know if I can explain it properly. It was like I recognized you somehow, like I knew you before I ever met you. The simple sincerity in his voice touched something deep in Nia's heart. I felt that too, she admitted. That night on the plane and every time we've been together since, like we've known each other much longer than we have. Some connections defy explanation, Chris said softly. Maybe it doesn't matter how we found each other, only that we did. Nia closed the distance between them, reaching for his hand. The familiar warmth of his fingers entwining with hers felt like coming home. I'm still figuring out who I am without my mother, she said, still trying to reconcile my life in San Francisco with my roots here. I don't know exactly what I want my future to look like yet. That's okay, Chris assured her. We can figure it out together, one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just us. Nia looked around at the library, at her mother's name now permanently affixed to a place of learning and discovery. It felt right somehow that this reconciliation was happening here, surrounded by books and the legacy of a woman who had taught her the power of forgiveness and second chances. I'd like that, she said finally, squeezing his hand. Us, figuring it out together. The relief and joy that spread across Chris's face made Nia's heart swell. He pulled her gently into his arms, holding her as if she were precious, irreplaceable. Thank you, he whispered against her hair, for giving us another chance. They stayed that way for a long moment, finding their way back to each other in the quiet of the library. When they finally pulled apart, Nia felt lighter than she had in months, as if a burden she hadn't fully recognized had been lifted from her shoulders. Come on, she said, tugging Chris toward the door. There are people I want you to meet, friends of my mom's who've known me since I was in pigtails. They'll tell you all my embarrassing childhood stories. Nothing would make me happier, Chris replied with a smile that reached his eyes. As they rejoined the gathering, Nia introduced Chris to her mother's colleagues and former students. He listened attentively to their stories, asked thoughtful questions, and treated each person with genuine interest and respect. Watching him, Nia realized he wasn't just doing this for her. He truly wanted to know these people, to understand the community that had shaped her. Later that afternoon, as they stood on the porch of her childhood home for the last time, Nia felt a sense of peace she hadn't expected. The house would soon belong to someone else, but the memories it held would always be hers. And now, she had someone to share those memories with, someone who wanted to be part of her story going forward. Are you okay? Chris asked, his arm around her shoulders as they looked at the house together. I am, Nia replied, surprising herself with how true it felt. It's time to say goodbye, but it doesn't feel like an ending anymore. More like a new chapter. Chris pressed a kiss to her temple. Every good story has many chapters. I'm honored to be part of yours. Our story, Nia corrected, turning to face him. It may have had an unconventional beginning, but I think it's going to be beautiful. It already is, Chris said softly, before leaning down to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and possibility. As they drove away from the house, Nia didn't look back. Instead, she looked at the man beside her, at the road ahead, and at the future they would build together. A future grounded in understanding, in acceptance, and in the kind of love that meets you exactly where you are and walks with you wherever you need to go. 3 months later, Nia boarded another red-eye flight from Atlanta to San Francisco. She had been in Georgia finalizing the details for a scholarship fund in her mother's name, established with help from the Wren Educational Foundation. As she made her way down the aisle, she smiled at the passenger already seated in 14B. "Fancy meeting you here," she said, as she slid into seat 14A. Chris grinned, looking up from his book. "Must be fate." Or careful planning, Nia teased, settling in beside him. "A bit of both, perhaps," he acknowledged, taking her hand. "The best things usually are." As the plane took off, carrying them back to San Francisco and the life they were building together, Nia rested her head on Chris's shoulder. Not by accident this time, but by choice. She had learned that some journeys were better shared, and that sometimes the path to finding yourself led straight to someone else. The note that had started it all was now framed in their home, a reminder that connections could begin in unexpected ways and that second chances were sometimes the most precious gift of all. And though Nia still missed her mother every day, she had found a new kind of peace in knowing that love, whether for a parent, a partner, or a place, never truly disappeared. It simply changed form, becoming part of who you were and who you might become. As she drifted to sleep against Chris's shoulder, Nia thought about seats on airplanes, chance meetings that weren't entirely chance, and the beautiful unpredictability of life. Some might call it coincidence, others destiny. Nia simply called it her story, complicated, imperfect, and entirely her own. And like all the best stories, it wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The end narrator. For 20 years, he locked himself away from the world. No visitors, no relationships, no women. Julian Cade was a ghost in his own glass tower, until one desperate night when fate came crashing through his door. "Julian, how the hell did you get here? This is a restricted entrance." "Leah, I'm so sorry. I was running and I closed my eyes for a second." Narrator. She was fleeing a dangerous past. He was hiding from a painful one. 2 broken souls who should have stayed strangers. But when he caught her in his arms that night, something awakened that had been dead for decades. "Julian, stay here tonight, where I know you're safe." Leah, "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Narrator. But her past had followed her to Savannah, and the man hunting her had connections to Julian's darkest secrets. Now, the recluse who hadn't touched a woman in 20 years must choose, retreat back into his tower of isolation, or fight for the woman who crashed into his life and awakened his heart. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The sunset bathed Savannah in golden light as Julian Cade stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. From the 84th floor of the Cade Grand Hotel, he could see the entire historic district, the Savannah River and beyond. But his eyes, cold and distant, didn't really see any of it anymore. At 52, Julian still cut an impressive figure. Tall, with salt and pepper hair that he kept precisely trimmed, and a face that had only grown more distinguished with age. His custom suits couldn't hide the fitness he maintained with ruthless discipline, just as his wealth couldn't fill the emptiness that had consumed him for 20 years. "Mr. Cade, your dinner is ready," said Mrs. Porter, his housekeeper of 15 years. Julian didn't turn around. "Leave it on the table, Mrs. Porter. It's salmon tonight. Your favorite," she added, her voice gentle but firm. Mrs. Porter was one of the few people who still tried to reach him. "Thank you. You can go home now." Mrs. Porter sighed quietly. Every night, the same routine. Every night, he ate alone, worked until midnight, then sat in the dark with a glass of scotch staring at the city below. "Good night, Mr. Cade. Don't forget, tomorrow is the hotel's quarterly review." Julian nodded slightly. The hotel was his family legacy. The one thing he hadn't neglected after Caroline died. After all, running an empire was easier than facing grief. When Mrs. Porter left, Julian finally moved to the dining table. He ate mechanically, not tasting the food. His phone buzzed with a message from his sister Olivia. "It's been 20 years, Julian. Call me. We need to talk." He deleted it without replying. After dinner, Julian retreated to his home office. The walls were glass, like most of his penthouse. A design choice Caroline had made when they first built it. "To let the light in," she'd said. The irony wasn't lost on him. All this transparency for a man who had become a ghost. In Atlanta, Leah Monroe stared at the diamond ring on her kitchen counter. Next to it lay the letter explaining why she couldn't marry Thomas Reynolds, successful attorney, and, as she'd recently discovered, master manipulator. At 29, Leah had thought she'd finally found stability. A handsome, successful man who wanted to marry her. No more moving around, no more feeling like she didn't belong. But then came the controlling behavior, the subtle comments about her clothes, her friends, her job as a freelance photographer, the way his anger simmered just below the surface when she disagreed with him, and finally, the discovery of the hidden camera in their bedroom. Leah picked up the ring and dropped it into an envelope, along with the keys to the condo they shared. Her suitcases were already in her car. Her phone rang. Thomas's face appeared on the screen. The third call in an hour. "Not this time," she whispered, declining the call. Her best friend Maya's voice echoed in her head. "He's not going to let you go easily, Leah. You know that, right?" Leah did know. She'd seen Thomas's obsession with control, how he needed to win at everything, how he'd isolated her from friends who weren't good enough for them. The phone rang again. A text followed. "Where are you? We need to talk about this. You're overreacting." Leah took a deep breath and grabbed her car keys. She didn't have a plan beyond getting away. Away from Atlanta, away from Thomas, away from the shame of almost marrying someone who saw her as a possession. She threw the last bag into the trunk of her blue Honda Accord and got behind the wheel. The digital clock on her dashboard read 9:45 p.m. Not ideal for starting a road trip, but waiting until morning wasn't an option. Thomas would be home by then. As she pulled away from the curb, Leah caught a glimpse of a black SUV turning onto her street. Thomas's car. Her heart raced as she accelerated, turning right at the corner instead of left, away from the approaching vehicle. "Just drive," she told herself. "Just get away." 2 hours later, Leah was on I-16, heading southeast. She hadn't planned to go to Savannah. She hadn't planned anything, but the highway signs pointed that way and she followed them, the radio keeping her company as she put miles between herself and her old life. By midnight, fatigue was setting in. Coffee from a gas station helped, but not enough. Her eyelids grew heavy as she approached the city limits. The GPS on her phone directed her toward downtown Savannah, but in her tired state, she missed a turn. "Recalculating," said the robotic voice as Leah found herself in an unfamiliar area with upscale hotels and businesses. She should stop for the night, find a hotel, but something in her wanted to keep going, as if Thomas might appear in her rearview mirror at any moment. Her eyes closed for just a second. When they opened, she was headed straight for a glass entrance of what looked like a private driveway. She jerked the wheel, but it was too late. The crash of glass filled her ears as her car smashed through the doors of what turned out to be the private entrance to the Cade Grand Hotel's exclusive upper floors. Julian was on his third scotch when the alarms blared. Red lights flashed throughout the penthouse as his security system detected a breach on the ground floor, specifically at the private entrance reserved for the hotel owner and VIP guests. His phone rang immediately. "Mr. Cade, there's been an incident," said Frank, head of security. "A car crashed through the private lobby entrance. One driver, female, appears injured but conscious." "How the hell did that happen?" Julian demanded, already moving toward his private elevator. "Looks like she took a wrong turn and possibly fell asleep at the wheel. We've called an ambulance." "No reporters," Julian said sharply. "Handle this quietly." The last thing he needed was the press crawling around, digging up stories about the ghost of the 84th floor again. It had been years since a reporter had managed to get close enough for a photo or comment, and Julian wanted to keep it that way. When the elevator doors opened at the private lobby, Julian was met with chaos. Glass everywhere. A blue Honda halfway through what used to be elegant glass doors. Security personnel surrounding the vehicle. And a woman, being helped from the driver's seat by one of his staff. Julian approached just as her legs seemed to give out. Without thinking, he stepped forward and caught her before she hit the floor. For the first time in 20 years, Julian Cade held a woman in his arms. Leah's head was spinning, There was glass in her hair, a small cut on her forehead, and her wrist throbbed with pain. But more disorienting than any of that was the fact that she was being held by a stranger, a tall, imposing man with the coldest eyes she'd ever seen. "I'm so sorry," she managed to say. "I don't know what happened. I missed a turn, and then I just—" "Save it," the man said curtly. "Medical help is on the way." Despite his harsh tone, he didn't let go of her. Instead, he helped her to a nearby chair, his movements efficient, but not unkind. Leah looked around at the destruction she'd caused. The private lobby was elegant, or had been before she drove through it. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and now shattered glass everywhere. "This is a restricted entrance," the man said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "How did you even get here?" "I was following my GPS," Leah said, wincing as she touched the cut on her forehead. "I missed a turn, and then I was so tired, I closed my eyes for a second." Julian stared at her, noticing details despite himself. She was beautiful, with dark brown skin, natural curls pulled back in a ponytail, and eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. She wore jeans, a simple t-shirt and running shoes, not the usual attire of someone trying to breach his privacy for a story or photo. "What's your name?" he asked. Leah Monroe." She looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "You're Julian Cade. This is your hotel." Julian tensed, waiting for the usual reaction, the awe, the awkward questions, the subtle prying that always followed when someone recognized him. Instead, Leah closed her eyes and said, "Of all the buildings in Savannah, I had to crash into a billionaire's lobby. Perfect end to a perfect day." The bitter irony in her voice was so unexpected that Julian almost smiled. Almost. The paramedics arrived then, interrupting whatever response he might have given. They examined Leah quickly, confirming that her injuries were minor. A sprained wrist, a cut that didn't need stitches, and some bruising from the seatbelt. "She should rest, but she doesn't need to go to the hospital," the paramedic told Julian. "Does she have somewhere to stay tonight?" Before Julian could answer, Leah spoke up. "I'll find a hotel, once I figure out what to do about my car." She looked at the Honda, still embedded in the entrance. "And your door." "I have insurance, but I don't think it covers driving through a billionaire's lobby." There was that tone again. Not impressed by his wealth, not intimidated by him, just exhausted and defeated. Julian surprised himself with his next words. "You can stay here tonight." Frank, the security chief, looked at him in shock. Julian Cade, who hadn't allowed a visitor to his private floors in 2 decades, was offering a room to the woman who had just destroyed his lobby. "I can't impose," Leah began. "It's not an imposition. It's a practical solution." Julian cut her off. "It's after midnight. You're injured. Your car isn't going anywhere tonight. The hotel has plenty of rooms." What Julian didn't say was that something about this woman's eyes haunted him. The raw pain there was familiar. He saw it in his own reflection every day. "Thank you," Leah said simply. Julian turned to Frank. "Get her settled in room 843. Have the doctor come up in the morning to check on her. And get that car removed and the entrance secured for the night." Frank nodded, still looking bewildered. Julian turned back to Leah. "We'll discuss the damages tomorrow. For now, get some rest." Without waiting for her response, he walked back to his private elevator. As the doors closed, he caught a last glimpse of Leah Monroe, looking small and lost amidst the destruction she'd caused. For the first time in years, Julian felt something stir within him. Not attraction, he'd buried that part of himself long ago. Not compassion, that had died with Caroline. No, what he felt was recognition. The look in Leah's eyes was the look of someone running from something. Julian knew all about running. He'd been doing it for 20 years, even if he never left this building. Back in his penthouse, Julian poured another scotch and returned to his vigil at the window. But tonight, instead of seeing Caroline's face reflected in the glass, he saw Leah Monroe's haunted eyes. In room 843, Leah sat on the edge of a king-sized bed, trying to process the surreal turn her night had taken. The room was luxurious, more so than any hotel she'd ever stayed in, but luxury was the last thing on her mind. She checked her phone. 5 missed calls from Thomas, 3 voicemails, a dozen texts, ranging from concerned to angry to threatening. The last one made her blood run cold. "I know you're heading southeast. Your phone's location is still on. Did you forget I have access? We're not done, Leah. Not even close." Leah's hands shook as she turned off her phone completely. She hadn't thought about the location sharing they'd set up months ago for safety. Thomas had access to her email, her cloud storage, her location, digital fingerprints she hadn't had time to erase in her rush to leave. She was too exhausted to deal with it now. Tomorrow she'd figure out her next steps, get her car fixed, somehow pay for the damage to the hotel, and keep running from Thomas. As she drifted off to sleep, Leah couldn't shake the image of Julian Cade's eyes. Everyone in Atlanta knew about the reclusive tech billionaire who owned the Cade hotel chain, the man who hadn't been photographed in years, the widower who locked himself away after his wife's death. His eyes were like ice. But behind that ice, Leah had recognized something. The same emptiness she felt when she looked in the mirror, the same pain. "Stop it," she whispered to herself. "You're not here to analyze some rich man's problems. You've got enough of your own." But as sleep finally claimed her, it wasn't Thomas's angry face that followed her into dreams. It was Julian Cade's cold, haunted eyes. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, Julian did something he hadn't done in years. He opened his laptop and searched for information about his unexpected guest. Leah Monroe, 29, freelance photographer from Atlanta. Awards for her work, documenting urban renewal projects. Recently engaged to Thomas Reynolds, prominent attorney with Reynolds, Blake and Associates. Julian frowned at the engagement announcement, dated just 2 months ago. The photo showed Leah smiling beside a handsome man, with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Julian recognized that look. He'd seen it on enough corporate sharks over the years. So why was his fiancée alone, driving to Savannah in the middle of the night, looking like she was running for her life? Julian closed the laptop. It wasn't his business. Tomorrow he'd have his staff arrange for her car repairs, settle the matter of the damages, and send her on her way. The less time Leah Monroe spent in his hotel, the better. But as he finally went to bed, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened tonight. For the first time in 20 years, his carefully constructed isolation had been breached. Not by choice, but by chance or fate, if he believed in such things, which he didn't. Not anymore. Not since the night Caroline's car went off that bridge, leaving him alone with nothing but wealth, guilt, and endless empty years stretching before him. Julian fell asleep thinking of 2 women, the one he'd lost and the one who had literally crashed into his life tonight. In his dreams, their faces blurred together, both looking at him with eyes that asked questions he didn't want to answer. Morning came too soon for Leah. She woke disoriented, her body aching from the accident. It took a moment to remember where she was. Room 843 of the Cade Grand Hotel, courtesy of the man whose property she'd damaged. A knock at the door startled her. Wrapping herself in the hotel robe, Leah opened it to find a middle-aged woman in a hotel uniform pushing a cart with breakfast. "Good morning, Miss Monroe. I'm Mrs. Porter, Mr. Cade's housekeeper. I've brought you breakfast and a change of clothes." She gestured to the shopping bags on the lower shelf of the cart. "Mr. Cade thought you might need these as your luggage is still in your car." Leah blinked in surprise. "That's unexpectedly thoughtful of him." Mrs. Porter's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Cade can be considerate when the situation calls for it. The hotel doctor will be up to check on you in an hour. Mr. Cade would like to meet with you at noon in the penthouse to discuss arrangements for your car." As Mrs. Porter turned to leave, Leah called after her. "What's he like? Really?" The housekeeper paused. "Mr. Cade is a private man. He has his reasons." She hesitated, then added, "Don't let the cold exterior fool you. There was a different man there once." After Mrs. Porter left, Leah turned on her phone just long enough to see more messages from Thomas. The last one sent a chill through her. "Found your note. You've made a big mistake, Leah. We need to talk. In person." She turned the phone off again and looked out the window at Savannah spread below her. She was on the 84th floor, just a few floors below Julian Cade's penthouse. From here, the city looked peaceful, uncomplicated. Leah knew better. Nothing was uncomplicated. Not her life, not her future, and certainly not the mysterious man who had taken her in last night, despite the damage she'd caused. At that same moment, Julian stood in his office, looking down at the shattered entrance below. Cleanup crews were already at work. Leah's car had been moved to the hotel's service garage, where mechanics were assessing the damage. Julian's assistant, Mark, was updating him on the morning's developments. The construction team estimates 3 days to replace the glass and repair the damage. Insurance will cover most of it. Julian nodded. "And Ms. Monroe's car? Damaged front end, but repairable. The garage says 3 to 4 days minimum." Julian frowned. He hadn't expected Leah to be stuck here that long. "Book her a room at another hotel." Mark looked uncomfortable. "Sir, All the good hotels in the historic district are booked solid. There's a film festival this weekend. Julian pinched the bridge of his nose. Fine. She can stay here until her car is fixed. As Mark left, Julian's phone rang. The screen displayed his sister's name again, for the second time in 24 hours, a record in recent years. Julian hesitated, then answered. Olivia, you actually picked up. His sister sounded genuinely surprised. Julian, we need to talk. I'm coming to Savannah. That's not necessary. It's been 20 years, Julian. 20 years since Caroline died. 20 years of you hiding in that glass tower. I've respected your grief, your guilt, your need for space, but enough is enough. Julian's jaw tightened. Olivia, I'll be there tomorrow, and this time, you're going to listen to what I have to say. Olivia's voice softened slightly. It's time, Julian. It's time to live again. Before he could respond, she hung up. Julian stared at the phone, feeling the careful control of his life slipping away. First, Leah Monroe crashes through his door, and now his sister was forcing her way back into his life. After 20 years of frozen grief and carefully maintained isolation, cracks were beginning to form in the walls Julian had built around himself. And he wasn't ready for what might come pouring through. At precisely noon, Leah stood outside the private elevator that led to Julian Cade's penthouse. She wore the clothes Mrs. Porter had brought her, a simple blue dress that somehow fit perfectly, and flat shoes that were comfortable on her bruised feet. The hotel doctor had confirmed that her injuries were minor, but recommended rest for at least another day. Her palms were sweaty as she pressed the button. The elevator doors opened immediately, revealing Julian himself rather than the security guard she'd expected. Mr. Cade, she said, surprised. Ms. Monroe. His expression was unreadable as he gestured for her to enter the elevator. I thought I'd escort you up myself. The elevator ride was silent and tense. Julian stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring straight ahead. In the small space, Leah noticed details she'd missed last night. The fine lines around his eyes, the precise cut of his expensive suit, the faint scent of his cologne. When the doors opened, Leah stepped into another world. The penthouse was stunning. Walls of glass offering a 360-degree view of Savannah, sleek modern furniture, artwork that probably cost more than her entire life savings. But despite its luxury, the space felt cold, unlived in, like a museum rather than a home. This way, Julian said, leading her to a dining area where lunch was laid out. I thought we could discuss arrangements over a meal. Leah sat awkwardly, feeling out of place among the crystal and fine china. Mr. Cade, I want to apologize again for last night. I'll pay for all the damages, though it might take me some time. Julian waved a hand dismissively. The hotel insurance will cover the repairs. That's not why I wanted to speak with you. He served her a plate of grilled salmon and vegetables before continuing. Your car will take 3 to 4 days to repair. Due to a local film festival, there are no rooms available at other suitable hotels. You're welcome to stay here until your car is fixed. Leah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. That's generous, but I can't impose. It's not generosity, Ms. Monroe. It's practicality. Julian's voice was businesslike. Now there's the matter of why you were driving alone at midnight, clearly exhausted in the first place. Leah set down her fork. That's personal. It became my business when you drove through my lobby. Their eyes locked across the table. To Julian's surprise, Leah didn't look away. I left my fiancé, she said finally. Ex-fiancé. I found out he's not the man I thought he was. Julian studied her face. Thomas Reynolds, the attorney. Leah's eyes widened. You looked me up. I make it a point to know who's staying in my hotel. Then you know I'm a photographer, not exactly in your social circle. There was a hint of defiance in her voice. I know you're running from something, or someone, Julian countered. Your ex-fiancé? Leah pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. Yes, Thomas, he's controlling. Possessive. I found out he installed hidden cameras in our bedroom. She hadn't meant to reveal that much, but something about Julian's direct gaze made her continue. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. Said it was for my protection. That's when I knew I had to leave. Julian's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. And now? Now I need to figure out where to go next. I can't go back to Atlanta. He has connections there. Leah hesitated, then added, and he's tracking me. My phone, my email, I didn't have time to change everything before I left. Julian stood abruptly and walked to the window. With his back to her, he asked, Is he dangerous? Leah thought about Thomas's temper, the way objects sometimes got broken during his episodes, the threats in his text messages. I don't know, she admitted. I've never seen him truly violent, but there's always been this feeling that he could be, if pushed. Julian turned to face her, his expression hard. "Stay here until your car is fixed. The hotel has excellent security. Your ex won't get past the front desk." Before Leah could respond, Julian's phone rang. He glanced at it and frowned. "I need to take this. Feel free to finish your lunch." He stepped away, speaking in low tones. Leah couldn't make out the words, but his body language showed tension, shoulders rigid, free hand clenched at his side. When he returned, his face was even more closed off than before. "And my sister will be arriving tomorrow. She's persistent." "You don't seem happy about it," Leah observed. Julian's laugh was short and bitter. "Olivia and I haven't spoken properly in years. She's chosen now to force a reunion." "Family is complicated," Leah said softly. Julian looked at her sharply, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Yes, it is." He seemed about to say more, then checked his watch instead. "I have meetings this afternoon. Mrs. Porter will show you out." As if on cue, the housekeeper appeared, but before Leah followed her to the elevator, she turned back to Julian. "Thank you for letting me stay." Julian nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Your room key will work for the duration of your stay. The hotel facilities are at your disposal." After Leah left, Julian poured himself a scotch, despite the early hour. Two women were about to disrupt the carefully ordered isolation he'd maintained for 20 years. Leah with her haunted eyes and direct gaze, and Olivia with whatever agenda had prompted her sudden visit. He wasn't ready for either of them. Back in room 843, Leah finally gathered the courage to properly check her messages. Thomas had called 17 times. The voicemails escalated from concern to rage to cold determination. The last one made her shiver. "I know you're in Savannah, Leah. I've contacted some colleagues there. It's a small city, I'll find you." Leah's hands shook as she deleted the messages and turned off her phone again. She needed a new phone, new accounts, a clean break. But all that required money she didn't have easy access to. Her bank accounts were joint with Thomas. She'd left with only her personal savings, which wouldn't last long. A knock at the door startled her. It was Mrs. Porter. "Mr. Cade thought you might need these," she said, handing Leah a shopping bag. Inside, Leah found a new cell phone still in its box and an envelope containing cash. "I can't accept this," Leah said, shocked. Mrs. Porter's expression softened. "Mr. Cade can be abrupt, but he understands what it means to need a fresh start. The phone is prepaid, untraceable. The money is a loan, if that makes you feel better." After Mrs. Porter left, Leah sat on the bed, staring at the gifts. Julian Cade was a contradiction. Cold and distant one moment, unexpectedly thoughtful the next. What had happened to make him retreat from the world so completely? Curiosity got the better of her. Using the new phone, Leah searched for information about Julian Cade. Most articles were about his business success or speculated about his reclusive lifestyle, but one headline caught her eye. "Tech mogul Julian Cade withdraws from public life after wife's tragic death." The article, dated 20 years ago, described how Caroline Cade had died in a car accident on a rainy night. She'd been driving home from a charity event that Julian had skipped to work late. The reporter implied that Julian blamed himself for not being with her that night. "So that's why," Leah murmured. Guilt and grief had turned Julian into the ghost that now haunted the top floor of his hotel. Just like her own pain had sent her fleeing into the night, crashing right into his life. That evening, Julian stood in his usual spot by the window, scotch in hand. But instead of staring unseeing at the city below, he found his gaze drawn to the 84th floor, wondering if Leah was looking out at the same view. He shouldn't have given her the phone and money. It was an impulsive decision, out of character for a man who calculated every move, but something about her situation had struck a chord. He knew what it was like to have your life shattered in an instant. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Flight lands at 10 a.m. Don't even think about being unavailable." Julian sighed. Tomorrow would bring a confrontation 20 years in the making. Olivia had never forgiven him for the rift that formed after Caroline's death, for shutting out their parents, for missing their father's funeral, for becoming a virtual stranger. He didn't blame her. The truth was, he hadn't forgiven himself either. The next morning, Leah woke early and decided to explore the hotel. With her new phone and some of the cash Julian had provided, she felt more secure. She'd spent the evening changing all her passwords and setting up new email accounts, erasing as many digital connections to Thomas as possible. The Cade Grand Hotel was even more impressive by daylight. The soaring lobby featured marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and a grand piano where a musician played softly. Hotel guests, mostly well-heeled tourists and business travelers, moved about with the relaxed air of people accustomed to luxury. Leah felt out of place until she spotted a small art gallery off the main lobby. Photography exhibits lined the walls, stunning black and white images of Savannah's historic district. "You like photography?" Leah turned to find Julian standing behind her, impeccably dressed as always. "It's my profession," she said. "These are beautiful." "Local artist," Julian said. "We showcase different photographers every month." Leah studied him. In the morning light he looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. "You're waiting for your sister," she guessed. Julian's mouth tightened. "Yes, I should go. Give you privacy." "Stay," Julian said, the word sounding like it surprised even him. "I could use a buffer." Before Leah could respond, a striking woman in her late 40s strode through the lobby doors. She had Julian's height and bearing, but where he was all controlled coldness, she radiated energy and determination. Her eyes, the same grey as Julian's, scanned the lobby and locked onto her brother. "Julian," her voice carried across the space. "Olivia." Julian's posture stiffened as his sister approached. Olivia embraced him briefly, an awkward gesture he didn't return. Then her gaze shifted to Leah, surprise evident in her expression. "This is Leah Monroe," Julian said, his tone neutral. "She's staying at the hotel while her car is being repaired. Ms. Monroe, my sister. Olivia Cade Bennett. Nice to meet you," Leah said, extending her hand. Olivia shook it, her eyes curious. "Likewise. You're the first person I've seen Julian willingly introduce in, well, a very long time." "Ms. Monroe had an accident," Julian said stiffly. "She drove through the private entrance 3 nights ago." Olivia's eyebrows shot up. "She what?" "It was an accident," Leah explained, embarrassed. "I missed a turn and crashed right through my brother's carefully constructed barriers." Olivia's laugh was genuine, her eyes suddenly warm. "I think I like you already, Leah Monroe." Julian checked his watch. "We should go upstairs to talk." "Actually," Olivia said, "I'm starving after that flight. Let's have breakfast first." She turned to Leah. "Join us?" Julian looked like he wanted to object, but said nothing. "I don't want to intrude on a family reunion," Leah said carefully. "Trust me, it's not going to be that kind of reunion," Olivia said dryly. "Please, I insist, any woman who can get my brother out of his tower is someone I want to know better." Reluctantly, Leah agreed. They went to the hotel's upscale restaurant, where the staff treated Julian with a deference that bordered on fear. Once they were seated and had ordered, Olivia wasted no time getting to the point. "So, Julian, 20 years. Don't you think that's long enough?" Julian's face hardened. "If you came here to rehash old arguments, I came here because it's time," Olivia cut in. "Time for you to know the truth about Caroline." Julian went very still. "What are you talking about?" Leah shifted uncomfortably. "I should really go—" "No," Julian said sharply. "Stay." His eyes locked with Olivia's. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of Ms. Monroe." Olivia studied her brother for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine." She took a deep breath. "Caroline was leaving you, Julian. The night she died, she wasn't coming home from that charity event. She was running away with David." Julian's face drained of color. "You're lying. David Miller, your best friend, your business partner." Olivia's voice was gentle but firm. "They'd been seeing each other for months. Caroline called me that night, told me everything. She was going to meet him, leave town together. But the rain, the dark road..." She shook her head. "The accident happened before she could." Julian's hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "Why are you telling me this now? After 20 years? Because you've punished yourself long enough for something that wasn't your fault," Olivia said. "You didn't kill Caroline by working late that night. You didn't drive her away. She made her choices, Julian, and you've been living in that glass prison carrying guilt you shouldn't have to bear." Julian stood abruptly. "Excuse me." Without another word, he strode from the restaurant. Leah looked at Olivia, shocked. "Why did you tell him like that, in public?" Olivia sighed, suddenly looking weary. "Because if I'd tried to tell him in private, he would have shut me out. Again. He needed to hear it, Leah. He's been killing himself slowly for 20 years over a woman who betrayed him. But to learn it like this... Sometimes a shock is the only way to break through walls that thick." Olivia studied Leah thoughtfully. "You care about him already, don't you? Even though you barely know him." Leah flushed. "I'm just concerned. That was a lot to process." "Julian has spent 20 years believing he was responsible for Caroline's death because he worked late that night, instead of accompanying her to the charity event," Olivia explained. He never knew she was planning to leave him. I kept her secret because I thought it would only hurt him more. But watching him waste his life in that penthouse," she shook her head. "I couldn't keep silent anymore." "What about David, the friend?" "Left town right after Caroline's funeral, started a new life in California. He's married now, has kids." Olivia's expression hardened. Never had the courage to tell Julian the truth either. After breakfast, Leah returned to her room, her mind reeling from what she'd witnessed. The pain in Julian's eyes when he heard about his wife's betrayal had been raw, visceral. She understood that kind of pain, the shock of discovering someone you loved had betrayed your trust. She was about to take a shower when her new phone rang. The number was blocked. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Leah," Julian's voice was tight. "Are you in your room?" "Yes, why?" "Stay there. Lock the door." Leah's heart raced. "Julian, what's happening?" "Your ex-fiancé is in the lobby, demanding to see you." Leah felt the blood drain from her face. "Thomas is here. How did he find me?" "Apparently he's been calling hotels all over Savannah. When he mentioned your name at the front desk, a new employee confirmed you were staying here." "What do I do?" Leah whispered, panic rising in her throat. "Nothing. Stay in your room. I'm handling it." "Julian, trust me." The line went dead. Leah's hands shook as she locked the deadbolt and chain on her door. Through the peephole, the corridor was empty, but she imagined Thomas finding his way to her floor, pounding on her door, forcing his way in. In the lobby, Julian Cade faced Thomas Reynolds with cold fury. The attorney was exactly as Julian had expected, expensively dressed, handsome in a conventional way, with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Mr. Reynolds," Julian said, his voice glacial, "I understand you're looking for one of our guests." Thomas straightened his tie. "My fiancée, Leah Monroe. There's been a misunderstanding. I need to speak with her." "Ex-fiancée," Julian corrected, "and she doesn't wish to speak with you." Thomas's practiced smile faltered. "This is a private matter, Mr. Cade. I appreciate your concern, but Leah and I need to resolve this ourselves." "That won't be possible." Julian nodded to Frank, his head of security, who stood nearby with two other security officers. "Ms. Monroe is under the protection of this hotel. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Thomas's smile disappeared entirely. "You don't understand. Leah isn't thinking clearly. She's made accusations that could damage my reputation, my career. I need to make her understand the consequences of her actions." "Is that a threat, Mr. Reynolds?" "It's a reality." Thomas stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I don't know what she's told you, but Leah has a history of emotional instability. She needs help, not enabling." Julian's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm only going to say this once. Leave my hotel. Leave Ms. Monroe alone. If you attempt to contact her again, I will personally ensure that every law firm in Georgia knows about the hidden cameras you installed without consent." Thomas's face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake, Cade. You don't know who you're dealing with. Neither do you." Julian's voice was soft but deadly. "Now get out of my hotel before I have security throw you out." For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Thomas adjusted his cuffs, his composure returning. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Tell Leah I'll be waiting when she comes to her senses." As Thomas walked away, Julian turned to Frank. "Have someone follow him. Make sure he leaves Savannah, and find out which employee confirmed Ms. Monroe was staying here. They're fired." Back in room 843, Leah jumped when someone knocked on her door. "Who is it?" she called, her voice shaky. "It's Julian." Relief flooded through her as she unlocked the door. Julian stood there, his expression tightly controlled. "He's gone," he said simply. "For now." What did he say? Did he threaten? "Nothing important." Julian cut her off. "I've arranged for security to keep an eye out. He won't get to you here." Leah's eyes filled with tears of relief and lingering fear. "Thank you. I don't know why you're helping me, but thank you." Julian looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," Leah insisted. "Most people would have just thrown me out after I crashed into their lobby. Instead, you've given me a room, money, a new phone, and now you're protecting me from my ex. Why?" Julian was silent for so long that Leah thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Because 20 years ago I shut the world out. I stopped seeing people, stopped caring. It was easier that way." He met her eyes. "But then you crashed through my door, and suddenly I had to see you, actually see another person again. And now I can't unsee you, Leah Monroe." The raw honesty in his voice left Leah speechless. Julian cleared his throat. I should go. I still have things to discuss with my sister. About what she told you this morning. A shadow crossed Julian's face. Yes. Do you believe her? About your wife? I don't know, Julian admitted, but there were signs. Things I ignored at the time. David's sudden departure after the funeral. Caroline's distance in those last months. He shook his head. It doesn't matter now. It matters if it helps you stop blaming yourself, Leah said softly. Julian looked at her for a long moment. Perhaps. He turned to go, then hesitated. Would you have dinner with me tonight? In the penthouse. There's something I'd like to discuss. Leah was surprised by the invitation, and even more surprised by how quickly she answered. Yes. After Julian left, Leah sat on the edge of her bed, trying to make sense of the connection forming between them. Two broken people, each running from their past in different ways. Julian had locked himself away in his glass tower. She had fled in the night with no destination in mind, and somehow they'd found each other. That evening, Leah dressed carefully in another outfit Mrs. Porter had provided, a simple black dress that was elegant, without being too formal. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied minimal makeup and arranged her curls. What was happening between her and Julian? Was it just gratitude on her part? Pity on his? Or was it something more? A recognition of shared pain? A chance at healing? As the elevator carried her up to the penthouse, Leah reminded herself to be cautious. Her judgment with men had proven flawed with Thomas. She couldn't afford another mistake. But when the doors opened and she saw Julian waiting for her, something fluttered in her chest that had nothing to do with caution. Julian had changed into more casual clothes, dark slacks and a grey sweater that matched his eyes. Without his formal business suit, he looked younger, less forbidding. "Welcome back," he said, gesturing for her to enter. The penthouse was transformed by soft lighting and music playing quietly in the background. On the terrace, a table was set for dinner, candles flickering in the evening breeze. "This is beautiful," Leah said, stepping outside. The view of Savannah at night was breathtaking, the city lights twinkling below them. "I thought we could eat outside tonight," Julian said, pulling out her chair. "The weather is perfect." As they ate, Julian seemed different, more relaxed, more present. He asked about her photography, listening intently as she described her projects documenting urban renewal in Atlanta's older neighborhoods. "You see beauty in broken things," he observed. "I see potential," Leah corrected. "Nothing stays broken forever unless you refuse to let it heal." Julian's eyes met hers, and she realized she wasn't just talking about buildings anymore. After dinner, Julian poured them each a glass of whiskey, and they moved to sit in comfortable chairs facing the view. "Did you talk to your sister again?" Leah asked. Julian nodded. "She showed me emails, from Caroline to her. They confirmed what Olivia told me. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's liberating, in a strange way, to know that Caroline's death wasn't my punishment for being a workaholic husband." Julian swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "All these years, I've been carrying guilt for something that wasn't my fault. What will you do now?" Julian looked at her thoughtfully. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. I have a proposition." Leah tensed. "What kind of proposition?" "A job offer," Julian said. "The hotel's photography exhibit curator is retiring next month. The position includes managing our gallery, selecting featured artists, and occasionally doing original photography for hotel promotions." Leah stared at him, stunned. "You're offering me a job? You barely know me. I've seen your portfolio online. Your work is exceptional, and you need a fresh start, away from Atlanta." Julian set down his glass. "The position comes with an apartment in the hotel's residential wing. You'd be completely independent, but with the hotel's security." "Is this because you feel sorry for me?" Leah asked, suddenly suspicious. "Because I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Julian said firmly. "It's a business decision. You're qualified, and the position needs to be filled." He hesitated, then added more softly, "And yes, I want to help you. Is that so terrible?" Leah didn't know what to say. The offer was perfect, a chance to start over, to use her skills, to be safe from Thomas. But it also meant staying close to Julian, and she wasn't sure if that was wise for either of them. "I need to think about it," she said finally. Julian nodded. "Of course. Take your time." He stood and walked to the railing, looking out over the city. After a moment, he spoke without turning around. 20 years is a long time to be alone, Leah. I didn't realize how long until someone crashed through my door and reminded me what it felt like to actually see another person, to care what happens to them. Leah joined him at the railing, standing close enough to feel the warmth of his body. And I didn't realize how trapped I'd been until I drove away from Atlanta with no plan, no destination, just the need to be free. They stood in silence, shoulders almost touching, looking out at the night sky. Something was happening between them, something fragile and unexpected. And then Julian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowning. "It's the front desk," he answered, listening intently, his expression darkening. "I'll be right down." "What is it?" Leah asked, alarmed by the sudden tension in his posture. Julian's eyes met hers, cold with fury. "Thomas Reynolds is back, and he's demanding to see me. By name." "Stay here," Julian told Leah, his voice tight with anger. "Lock the terrace door behind me." "I'm coming with you," Leah insisted, already moving toward the elevator. Julian caught her arm. "That's exactly what he wants. To get to you. He asked for you by name, Julian, not me." Leah met his gaze steadily. "Whatever he's planning, I need to face it." For a moment, Julian looked like he might argue, but then his expression softened. "All right, but stay behind me. And if I tell you to leave, you leave. No questions." The elevator ride down to the lobby was tense. Julian stood slightly in front of Leah, as if physically shielding her. When the doors opened, they could immediately see Thomas standing in the center of the lobby, surrounded by security guards who looked unsure whether to remove him by force. "Ah, there he is," Thomas said loudly as Julian approached. "The reclusive Julian Cade, in the flesh. I was beginning to think you were just a myth." "Mr. Reynolds," Julian's voice was cold, "I believe I made myself clear earlier. You're not welcome here." Thomas smiled, but his eyes remained hard. "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. It concerns a mutual acquaintance, David Miller." Julian went perfectly still. "What did you say?" "David Miller," Thomas repeated, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Your former business partner, my current one." Leah looked between the two men, confused. Thomas had never mentioned knowing anyone connected to Julian. "You're lying," Julian said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He pulled up a photo and held it out. "Last month's partners' retreat. That's me on the left, David in the center." Julian stared at the photo, his face draining of color. The resemblance between the man in the photo and Julian was striking. They could have been brothers. "What do you want?" Julian asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Thomas slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Just a private conversation about the past and about Leah." Julian glanced at Leah, who stood frozen, trying to process this unexpected connection. "My office," he finally said to Thomas. 5 minutes, alone." "Julian?" Leah started to protest. "It's all right," Julian assured her, though his expression was grim. "Frank will stay with you." As Julian led Thomas toward the executive offices, Frank stepped closer to Leah. "Don't worry, Ms. Monroe. Mr. Cade can handle himself." "What's happening?" Leah asked, watching the two men disappear down a corridor. "How does Thomas know someone from Julian's past?" Frank shook his head. "It's not my place to say, but Mr. Cade has a complicated history with David Miller. They were best friends once, business partners, until Mrs. Cade's accident." "I know about that," Leah said quietly. "Julian's sister told us this morning." Frank looked surprised. "Ms. Olivia told him the truth after all these years. You knew? About Caroline and David?" Frank looked uncomfortable. "Many of the long-term staff suspected, but it wasn't our place to say anything. Mr. Cade was destroyed after Mrs. Cade's death. No one wanted to hurt him more." In Julian's office, the two men faced each other across a desk. "How long have you known?" Julian demanded. Thomas sat back, the picture of relaxed confidence. "About you and David? Only recently. When Leah left, I started looking into where she might go. Her phone's location showed Savannah, and when I checked the hotels, I found she'd had an accident at the Cade Grand. The name rang a bell. David had mentioned a former partner named Cade. And you put it together," Julian said flatly. "David was drunk at a company event last year. Started talking about the one who got away, not a client, but a woman. Caroline said her husband never knew that the poor fool blamed himself when she died driving to meet her lover." Thomas's smile was cold. "He didn't name names, but it wasn't hard to connect the dots once I started looking." Julian's hands clenched on the desk. "What exactly do you want, Reynolds?" "Simple. I want Leah back. She belongs with me." "She doesn't belong to anyone," Julian said sharply. "And she's made her choice." Thomas leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to convince Leah to come home with me, or I'm going to make sure the whole world knows about poor, pathetic Julian Cade. The man who spent 20 years mourning a wife who was cheating on him with his best friend. Julian stared at him, his expression hardening. You think I care about that? Olivia already told me the truth this morning. The world can know whatever it wants. Thomas looked momentarily taken aback, but recovered quickly. That's not all. David told me about the project you were working on before Caroline died. The security system that failed. The one that cost those people their lives. Julian went pale. That wasn't my fault. The system was tampered with. Was it? Or was that just the story you told yourself? Thomas smiled again. The press would love to re-examine that old scandal, especially now that the great Julian Cade has finally emerged from his self-imposed exile. In the lobby, Leah paced anxiously. 10 minutes had passed, then 15. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. Where's Julian's office? She asked Frank. Ms. Monroe, Mr. Cade asked you to wait. I'm done waiting, Leah said firmly. This involves me. I have a right to be part of the conversation. Frank hesitated, then nodded. This way. As they approached Julian's office, they could hear raised voices. Frank knocked once, then opened the door. Julian and Thomas both turned, surprise on their faces. Leah, Thomas said, his voice softening. There you are. I've been so worried. Save it, Leah said coldly. Whatever you're threatening Julian with, it won't work. I'm not going anywhere with you. Thomas's expression hardened. You don't understand what's at stake here. Then explain it, Leah challenged. What exactly are you holding over Julian's head? Julian stepped forward. Leah, you don't need to be involved in this. I already am involved. Leah moved to stand beside Julian, facing Thomas. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. Something shifted in Julian's expression, surprise followed by a warmth Leah hadn't seen before. Thomas looked between them, his eyes narrowing. Well, isn't this touching? The broken photographer and the reclusive widower finding solace in each other. His voice dripped with sarcasm. Did he tell you why he's been hiding all these years, Leah? It's not just because his wife died, it's because people died because of him. That's enough, Julian said sharply. 20 years ago, Thomas continued, ignoring him, Cade Technologies released a security system for a government facility. It failed catastrophically. 3 people died. The official report blamed tampering, but there were rumors the system was flawed from the start. That Julian rushed it to market knowing there were problems. That's not true, Julian said, his voice tight with anger. Isn't it? Thomas challenged. You settled the lawsuits out of court, paid millions to keep it quiet, and then you disappeared, leaving David to rebuild the company's reputation. Leah looked at Julian, who stood rigid, his face pale. Julian? The system was sabotaged, Julian said quietly. We had proof, but fighting it publicly would have exposed classified information. So yes, I settled, and I stepped away. How convenient, Thomas sneered. It's the truth, Julian insisted. Ask David if you don't believe me. He saw the same evidence I did. Thomas shrugged. Maybe. But the press won't care about nuance, will they? Reclusive billionaire's deadly secret makes a much better headline. He turned to Leah. Is this really the man you want to pin your hopes on? Someone who's been hiding from his mistakes for 20 years? You need to leave, Leah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Now, before I call the police and report the stalking, the harassment and the hidden cameras. Thomas's confident smile faltered. You wouldn't. It would be your word against mine. I'm a respected attorney. I have proof, Leah said. I found the camera, Thomas. I took pictures of it. And I copied the files from your computer, the ones showing the feed from our bedroom. Did you really think I'd leave without protecting myself? It was a bluff. She hadn't had time to gather evidence before fleeing, but the flash of panic in Thomas's eyes told her he believed her. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and dangerous, for either of you. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, Leah's confident facade crumbled. She sank into a chair, trembling. Julian crouched beside her. Are you all right? Leah nodded, then shook her head. I don't know. I had to stand up to him. I couldn't let him keep threatening us. Us, Julian repeated softly, as if testing the word. Leah met his eyes. Was it true, what he said about the security system? Julian sighed heavily and stood, moving to look out the office window. Partly. There was a failure. People died. But it wasn't because the system was flawed. It was sabotaged by someone who wanted access to the facility. He turned back to her. I didn't hide because I was guilty, Leah. I hid because I was broken. By Caroline's death, yes, but also by the weight of those other lives. Even knowing it wasn't my fault didn't make it easier to bear. Leah stood and crossed to him. I believe you. Julian looked down at her, surprise and gratitude in his eyes. Why? You barely know me. I know enough, Leah said simply. I know you took in a stranger who crashed through your door. I know you've protected me from Thomas. I know you offered me a job to help me start over. She hesitated, then added softly, and I know what it's like to blame yourself for things beyond your control. Julian reached out, his fingers lightly touching her cheek. The gesture was so gentle, so tentative, that Leah felt tears spring to her eyes. We should get back upstairs, Julian said, his voice rough with emotion. It's been a long day. As they returned to the elevator, Frank approached them. Mr. Cade, Mr. Reynolds has left the building. I've instructed security not to allow him entry again under any circumstances. Thank you, Frank, Julian said. Back in the penthouse, the remains of their dinner still sat on the terrace table, the candles burned down to stubs. The romantic atmosphere had been shattered by Thomas's appearance, but something else had taken its place, a deeper connection forged in the face of shared adversity. I should go back to my room, Leah said, suddenly feeling awkward. Stay, Julian said. Please, just stay and talk with me. I'm not ready to be alone with my thoughts tonight. They moved to the living area, where Julian poured them each a fresh drink. They sat on opposite ends of a large sofa, both physically and emotionally exhausted. Will you take the job? Julian asked after a long silence. The curator position? Leah smiled faintly. Is the offer still open after all this? Especially after all this, Julian said. I meant what I said before. You're qualified, and yes, I want to help you. But there's more to it now. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. You make me want to stop hiding, Leah. For the first time in 20 years, I'm thinking about the future instead of the past. Julian, Leah began, not sure what to say. He held up a hand. I'm not asking for anything. I know we've only just met. I know you're dealing with your own demons. I'm just being honest about what I'm feeling. Leah took a deep breath. Yes, I'll take the job. Not because I need rescuing, but because it's a good opportunity. And because, she met his eyes, because I'm not ready to walk away from whatever this is between us. Julian's smile was slow but genuine, perhaps the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines of grief and isolation. They talked for hours, sharing pieces of their lives. Julian told her about growing up in the hotel business, about building his tech company from scratch, about the early years with Caroline when everything seemed possible. Leah spoke of her childhood dreams of becoming a photographer, her struggles to establish herself in a competitive field, her slow realization that Thomas was isolating her from friends and opportunities. As the night deepened, they moved to the terrace, wrapped in light blankets against the cool air. The city slept below them, peaceful and unaware of the drama unfolding in the glass tower above. Tell me about your photography, Julian said. What makes you passionate about it? Leah thought for a moment. I love capturing moments of transformation, not the before or the after, but the during, that space where something is becoming something else, like an old building being renovated or an abandoned lot becoming a garden. She smiled. I guess I believe in second chances, in the possibility of renewal. Julian reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. The touch was electric, sending warmth up her arm and into her chest. I'm beginning to believe in them too, he said quietly. The moment was interrupted by Julian's phone. He checked it with a frown. It's Olivia. She's in the lobby, wants to come up. At this hour? Leah asked, surprised. Julian nodded. She's leaving tomorrow, wants to say goodbye. He looked at Leah questioningly. I should go, Leah said, standing. Give you privacy with your sister. No, Julian said quickly, then softened his tone. Stay, please. I'd like her to get to know you better. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Olivia stepped out. She took in the scene, Julian and Leah on the terrace, the remnants of their long conversation evident in the empty glasses and comfortable proximity. Well, she said, smiling, this is a pleasant surprise. Olivia, Julian greeted her. You said you wanted to say goodbye? Yes, my flight's early tomorrow. Olivia sat in a chair across from them, but I wanted to check on you first. After this morning's revelation, Julian nodded. It was a shock, but perhaps one I needed. And now, Olivia asked, her gaze shifting between Julian and Leah. Now I'm trying to move forward, Julian said simply. Olivia's smile widened. I can see that. She turned to Leah. I hope my brother isn't being too brooding and mysterious. It's his default setting. Leah laughed softly. He has his moments. I'm sitting right here, Julian pointed out dryly. Yes, you are, Olivia said, her expression turning serious. After 20 years of hiding, you're finally present again. It's good to see, Julian. Julian's phone rang again. He glanced at it with a frown. It's Frank, excuse me. He stepped inside to take the call. Olivia leaned toward Leah. I don't know what you've done to my brother, but I haven't seen him this alive in 2 decades. I didn't do anything, Leah protested. I just crashed into his lobby. Sometimes that's what it takes, Olivia said. A collision to shake things loose. She studied Leah intently. You've had your own collisions, I think. Leah nodded. Yes, I'm trying to rebuild too. Then perhaps you found each other at exactly the right time, Olivia said softly. Julian returned, his expression troubled. Thomas Reynolds just checked into the Mariston Hotel across the street. What? Leah felt cold fear wash over her. He's staying there? Julian nodded grimly. Frank has a friend in their security. Reynolds specifically requested a room with a view of this building. He's watching us, Leah whispered. He's trying to intimidate us, Julian corrected. But he can't reach you here. The penthouse is secure. I should go, Olivia said, standing. You two have things to discuss. She hugged Julian, whispering something in his ear that made him smile faintly. Then she surprised Leah by embracing her as well. Take care of him, she murmured. He's stronger than he thinks, but he's been alone too long. After Olivia left, Julian and Leah stood at the terrace railing, looking across at the Mariston Hotel. One of its windows was illuminated, a solitary figure visible behind the glass. He's watching right now, Leah said, shivering despite the blanket around her shoulders. Julian moved closer, his arm going around her protectively. Let him watch. He can't touch you here. Leah leaned into Julian's warmth, drawing strength from his solid presence. What does he want, really? It can't just be about getting me back. Control, Julian said. Men like Reynolds can't stand losing it. And now he's lost control of you and failed to intimidate me. His ego can't handle that. I'm scared, Leah admitted. Not just of what he might do, but of everything. These feelings, this situation. It's all happening so fast. Julian turned her gently to face him. I know. I'm scared too. I've been frozen for 20 years, Leah. Learning to feel again, it's terrifying. His honesty broke something open inside her. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't want to make another mistake. I thought I knew Thomas, but I was wrong. How can I trust my judgment now? Julian wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. We take it one day at a time. No promises, no expectations, just presence. Being here, now. His face was close to hers, his eyes soft in the dim light. Leah felt herself drawn toward him, her fear momentarily overshadowed by the need to connect, to feel something real and true. Julian hesitated, then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. The kiss was gentle, questioning, a whisper of contact that sent warmth spreading through Leah's body. When Julian started to pull back, she followed, deepening the kiss, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. For a moment the world fell away, Thomas watching from across the street, the pain of the past, the uncertainty of the future. There was only this moment, this connection, this fragile new beginning. When they finally separated, Julian rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. Stay here tonight, he whispered. Not, I don't mean, just stay, where I know you're safe. Leah nodded, understanding. The guest room? Yes. Julian stepped back slightly, his hand still resting lightly on her waist. I'll feel better knowing you're not alone in room 843, with Thomas so close by. Okay, Leah agreed. Thank you. Later, as Leah lay in the luxurious guest bed, she heard Julian moving around in the penthouse, checking locks, making phone calls in low tones. She should have felt trapped, caught between a possessive ex-fiancé and a man she barely knew but was rapidly developing feelings for. Instead, she felt strangely free. For the first time since discovering Thomas's betrayal, she wasn't running. She was standing her ground, with Julian beside her. Across the street, Thomas Reynolds stood at his hotel window, watching the lights in the penthouse. One by one they went out, until only a single lamp remained lit in what he guessed was a bedroom. His jaw clenched in anger and jealousy. Enjoy it while it lasts, he muttered. Tomorrow everything changes. He turned to his laptop, where the screen displayed an old news article. Cade Technologies security breach investigation ongoing. Beside it was an email from David Miller with an attachment labeled Julian Cade, Confidential Files. Thomas smiled coldly. By this time tomorrow, Julian Cade's carefully constructed privacy would be shattered, and Leah would learn that her new protector had secrets that made Thomas's transgressions look trivial by comparison. The next morning, Leah woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the scent of coffee. For a moment she was disoriented, then remembered. She was in Julian's penthouse, in his guest room. She found a robe laid out for her and slipped it on over the t-shirt and shorts Mrs. Porter had provided for her to sleep in. Following the smell of coffee, she made her way to the kitchen, where Julian stood at the counter, already dressed in casual slacks and a light sweater. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Coffee, please," Leah said, suddenly shy in the morning light. Last night's kiss seemed both distant and immediate, a dream and a vivid reality. Julian handed her a mug, their fingers brushing. "Sleep well?" "Better than I expected," Leah admitted. "You?" "First decent night's sleep in a very long time," Julian said. They moved to the breakfast table, where Julian had laid out fruit, pastries, and yogurt. As they ate, they carefully avoided discussing the kiss, focusing instead on practical matters: Leah's car repairs, nearly complete, her new job, starting officially next week, the apartment she would move into being prepared now. "I've been thinking," Julian said as they finished breakfast, "about Thomas, about what he might do next." Leah tensed. "And? I think we should be proactive. My legal team is preparing a restraining order against him, and I've contacted some former colleagues who still owe me favors. We're going to look into those hidden cameras, see if we can find evidence to support criminal charges." "You would do that?" Leah asked, touched by his determination to protect her. "Of course," Julian said simply, "but there's something else, something I need to tell you, before Thomas tries to use it against me again." Julian led her to his office, where he unlocked a drawer and removed a thick file. The full story of what happened 20 years ago, the security system failure, the deaths, everything. "I want you to read it, to understand." He placed it on the desk between them. "No more secrets." Leah was moved by his trust. "Julian, you don't have to." "I do," he insisted. "Thomas will try to use this against me, against us. I want you to know the truth, from me." "All right," Leah agreed. "I'll read it." Julian's phone buzzed. He checked it with a frown. "The mechanic, your car is ready. They're bringing it to the hotel garage." "That's good news," Leah said, though part of her felt a pang at the thought of leaving the safety of Julian's penthouse. "You don't have to go back to room 843, Julian said, as if reading her thoughts. "You can stay here until your apartment is ready, or—" He hesitated. "You could leave. Start fresh somewhere else, where Thomas couldn't find you." "I could arrange it. New identity, new city." Leah considered it for a moment. Running had been her first instinct when she fled Atlanta. But now, "No," she said firmly. "I'm done running. I want the job. I want to stay in Savannah." She met his eyes. "I want to see where this goes, Julian. Whatever this is." Relief and something warmer flickered in Julian's eyes. "I was hoping you'd say that." They were interrupted by Julian's assistant, Mark, who knocked urgently on the office door. "Mr. Cade, you need to see this." Mark handed Julian a tablet. On the screen was a breaking news headline: "Tech billionaire Julian Cade linked to fatal security breach. Exclusive documents reveal cover-up." Julian's face drained of color as he scanned the article. "Thomas leaked the files, twisted versions of confidential documents." Leah moved to his side, reading over his shoulder. The article painted Julian as a ruthless businessman who had covered up design flaws in a security system, leading to deaths, then paid his way out of criminal charges. "This is a lie," Julian said, his voice tight with anger. "The system was deliberately sabotaged. We had proof." "Where's the proof now?" Leah asked. "In secure storage. But releasing it would violate national security protocols." Julian ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Thomas knew that. He's counting on me not being able to defend myself publicly." Mark looked grim. "Sir, reporters are already gathering in the lobby, and your phone is ringing non-stop." Julian turned to Leah. "I'm sorry. This is exactly what I wanted to protect you from." "Don't apologize," Leah said firmly. "This is Thomas's doing, not yours." Julian squared his shoulders, decision made. "Mark, call a press conference for this afternoon, 3 o'clock, and get me the State Department on the phone. It's time to end this, once and for all." As Mark hurried away, Julian pulled Leah into his arms. "This will get ugly before it gets better. The press will dig into everything. My past, Caroline, my reclusive years, and they'll find you. Ask about us. I can handle it, Leah assured him, though her heart raced at the thought of public scrutiny. Julian's phone rang again. He checked it, then looked up at Leah with a strange expression. "What is it?" she asked. "It's David Miller," Julian said, his voice hollow. "He's here, in the lobby." Leah felt a chill. "Thomas's partner? Your old friend?" Julian nodded, his expression hardening. "The man who was having an affair with my wife. He wants to talk. Are you going to see him?" Julian's eyes met hers, determination replacing shock. "Yes, it's time to face the past. All of it." As Julian prepared to go downstairs, his phone rang one more time. He answered, listened briefly, then froze, his face a mask of horror. "When?" he demanded. "How many?" "Yes, I'm coming right now." He hung up, already moving toward the door, his face ashen. "Julian, what's happened?" Leah asked, alarmed. "There's been an explosion," Julian said, his voice strangled. "In the private lobby, the same entrance you crashed through. 3 people are injured." He turned to her, his eyes wild with fear and guilt. "And Thomas Reynolds was seen entering that area just before it happened." Julian and Leah raced down to the scene of the explosion, taking the service elevator to avoid the gathering press. The private lobby entrance was in chaos, shattered glass everywhere, smoke hanging in the air, emergency responders tending to the injured. Frank met them at the security checkpoint, his face grim. 3 staff members injured, none critically, thank God. The blast was relatively small, mostly designed to cause panic rather than serious damage. "And Thomas?" Julian demanded, scanning the chaotic scene. Security cameras caught him entering the area 5 minutes before the explosion. He left through a service door immediately after. "Police are searching for him now." Leah felt sick. "He did this because of me. Those people got hurt because of me." Julian turned to her, gripping her shoulders firmly. "No, this is not your fault. Thomas made his choices. He's responsible for his actions, not you." A police officer approached them. "Mr. Cade, I'm Detective Rivera. We need to ask you some questions about the suspect, Thomas Reynolds." Julian nodded. "Of course. But first, I need to speak with someone in my lobby. It's connected to this situation." Detective Rivera looked skeptical, but nodded. "Make it quick. We need your statement." As they made their way to the main lobby, Julian turned to Leah. "You don't have to come with me for this. I'm not letting you face David alone," Leah said firmly. The main lobby was crowded with guests being evacuated and reporters trying to get information. In the center of it all stood a man who could have been Julian's contemporary, around the same age, similarly well-dressed, but with an air of practiced charm rather than Julian's reserved dignity. David Miller's eyes widened when he saw Julian approaching. "Julian, my God, I just heard about the explosion. Are you all right?" "Why are you here, David?" Julian asked coldly. David glanced at Leah, then back to Julian. "Thomas Reynolds contacted me yesterday. He said he was using information about our past to pressure you. I came to warn you. A bit late for warnings," Julian said. "He's already leaked documents about the security system to the press. And now he's planted a bomb in my hotel." David paled. "I had nothing to do with that. I swear, Julian. When he started asking questions about the old project, I thought he was just curious about my history with Cade Technologies. I had no idea he was planning to use it against you." "And what about Caroline?" Julian's voice was dangerously quiet. "Did you come to talk about that too?" David's expression crumpled. "Julian, Not here," Julian cut him off, noticing the reporters edging closer. "My office." As they headed toward the executive offices, Leah squeezed Julian's arm supportively. His face was a mask of control, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. In Julian's office, David sank into a chair, looking suddenly older. "I've rehearsed this moment for 20 years, he said. "What I would say if I ever faced you again. And now that I'm here, words seem inadequate." "Try anyway," Julian said coldly, remaining standing. David nodded. "I loved her. It wasn't just an affair, Julian. We were planning a life together." He met Julian's gaze directly. "Caroline wasn't happy. She hadn't been for a long time. So you took it upon yourself to save her from me." Julian's voice was tight with controlled anger. "It wasn't like that," David insisted. "It just happened. We were working late on the Sentinel project. She was frustrated that you were always too busy for her. One thing led to another." Julian's hands clenched into fists. "For how long?" 6 months, David admitted. "The night of the accident, she was coming to meet me. We were going to leave town together, start over somewhere new. Leah watched Julian struggle with the pain of these revelations. Though Olivia had told him the basics, hearing the details from David himself was clearly devastating. "Why are you telling me this now?" Julian asked. "Because you deserve the truth," David said, "and because Reynolds is trying to use our past to hurt you. He showed me the documents he planned to leak. They're manipulated, Julian. Sections deleted, context removed. They make it look like you ignored safety warnings about the Sentinel system." "Of course I didn't," Julian said. "The system was sabotaged. We both saw the evidence." David nodded. "I still have the original reports, the real evidence. I brought copies with me." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. "Use these to clear your name." Julian took the folder, his expression guarded. "Why would you help me now, after all this time?" David looked down. "Guilt, partly. After Caroline died, I couldn't face you. I took the coward's way out, let you shoulder all the blame for the Sentinel disaster while I rebuilt my life." He looked up again. "But mostly, it's because Reynolds is dangerous. When he started asking about you, about Caroline, about the old security breach, there was something in his eyes, an obsession. I realized he wasn't just curious. He wanted to destroy you." "Because of Leah," Julian said, glancing at her. David followed his gaze, noticing Leah properly for the first time. "You must be the woman Reynolds is so fixated on. He told me his fiancée had left him for an old rival of mine." "I didn't leave him for Julian," Leah clarified. "I left because Thomas was controlling, manipulative, and installed hidden cameras in our bedroom without my knowledge." David winced. "That sounds like the man I've come to know. Behind the charming attorney facade, there's something not right about him." A knock at the door interrupted them. Detective Rivera entered without waiting for a response. "Mr. Cade, we need that statement now, and we have an update on Reynolds." "Have you found him?" Julian asked. Rivera shook his head. "Not yet, but we found his hotel room at the Mariston. There were concerning items, plans of your hotel's security system, materials that could be used for another device, and photographs of Ms. Monroe. Lots of them." Leah felt a chill. "He's been stalking me for longer than I realized. We're treating this as a case of domestic terrorism," Rivera said. "Reynolds is now the subject of a multi-agency manhunt. In the meantime, we need to evacuate the hotel completely for a thorough security sweep." Julian nodded. "Of course, whatever you need." After giving their statements, Julian, Leah, and David moved to a secure room in the hotel's administrative wing, where security staff had set up a temporary command center. "What happens now?" Leah asked, exhaustion evident in her voice. "Now we clear Julian's name," David said, opening the folder he'd brought. "These documents prove the Sentinel system was sabotaged by an inside man working for a competing company. Julian had nothing to do with the malfunction that cost those lives." Julian studied the papers, his expression grim. "This still doesn't explain why Thomas targeted me specifically. The connection to you could be coincidence, but this level of preparation suggests he knew exactly who I was to Leah from the beginning." Leah frowned, thinking. "When I first met Thomas, he asked a lot of questions about my photography. He seemed particularly interested in a series I did on technological innovation. One of the companies I photographed was a security firm." Her eyes widened with sudden realization. "A firm that was acquired by Cade Technologies last year." "Which firm?" Julian asked sharply. "Secure Vision," Leah said. "I did a photo essay on their Atlanta headquarters for a magazine." David and Julian exchanged a look. "Secure Vision was founded by former employees of our main competitor 20 years ago," Julian explained. "The same competitor we suspected of sabotaging the Sentinel system. So Thomas may have connections to the people who were behind the original sabotage," David said slowly. "That's why he targeted you specifically, Julian. And when Leah coincidentally ended up at your hotel, he saw an opportunity for revenge," Julian finished. "Leah felt sick. He was using me from the beginning. Our entire relationship was a setup." Julian moved to her side, his hand finding hers. "We don't know that for certain, but it would explain his obsession with finding you, with threatening me." David watched their interaction with interest. "You two have grown close." Julian met Leah's eyes. "Yes, we have." A security officer entered the room. "Mr. Cade, the press conference is scheduled for 4 p.m. now, after the police complete their initial sweep. And your sister is on the phone. She's heard about the explosion and is flying back." Julian nodded. "Tell her I'm fine, but she should stay away until we know it's safe." He turned to David. "I need you at that press conference to corroborate the evidence about the Sentinel system." David nodded without hesitation. "Of course." whatever you need. Hours later, after police had cleared the public areas of the hotel, Julian stood before a crowd of reporters in the grand ballroom. Leah and David waited in the wings as Julian addressed the allegations that Thomas had leaked to the press. 20 years ago, a security system designed by my company failed, resulting in the tragic deaths of 3 people, Julian began, his voice steady. Initial investigations suggested sabotage, but out of respect for the victims' families and due to national security concerns, I chose not to fight these allegations publicly. Instead, I settled the lawsuits and withdrew from public life. He paused, his eyes finding Leah's for a moment before continuing. Recent events have forced me to break my silence. My former business partner, David Miller, has provided conclusive evidence that the Sentinel system was indeed sabotaged by an operative working for a competitor. That evidence has been turned over to the authorities. Julian's gaze swept over the assembled reporters. The man responsible for leaking manipulated documents about this incident, Thomas Reynolds, is now wanted in connection with today's bombing at this hotel. His actions appear to be part of a calculated plan to discredit me and harm those close to me. The press conference continued with David presenting the evidence, followed by a statement from Detective Rivera confirming the police were pursuing Reynolds for domestic terrorism. Through it all, Leah watched Julian with pride. After 20 years of hiding, he was facing the world again, facing his past. When the press conference ended, Julian, Leah, and David retreated to a private room. "You did well," David told Julian, "better than I would have in your position." Julian nodded, some of the old tension between them easing. "Thank you for coming forward with the evidence. It can't have been easy for you either." David smiled sadly. "Perhaps we can finally put the past behind us. Not forget, but move forward." "Perhaps," Julian agreed. He looked at David thoughtfully. "You loved her, Caroline." David nodded. "Yes, I did. Were you happy in the time you had together?" David seemed surprised by the question. "Yes, we were." He hesitated, then added, "She did love you once, Julian. But people change. We both changed." Julian nodded, a weight seeming to lift from his shoulders. "Yes, we all did." Their conversation was interrupted when Frank burst into the room. "Mr. Cade, they've found Reynolds." Julian stood immediately. "Where?" "Police cornered him trying to board a private plane at the regional airport. He had fake identification, cash, and a laptop with more files about you." Frank hesitated. "There was a struggle. Reynolds was shot. He's in surgery now. Condition critical." Leah sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "Is it really over?" "It appears so," Frank said. "The police want to question both of you again, but they've confirmed Reynolds acted alone in the bombing." After Frank left, David stood to go. "I should get back to my hotel. It's been a long day for everyone." Julian extended his hand. "Thank you, David, for everything." David shook it firmly. "Take care of yourself, Julian. And her." He nodded toward Leah. "Don't wait another 20 years to live your life." After David left, Julian turned to Leah. "Are you all right?" Leah shook her head. "I don't know what I am. Relieved? Shocked? Guilty that people got hurt because of Thomas's obsession with me?" Julian sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "None of this is your fault. Thomas Reynolds was a disturbed man with a vendetta that predated your relationship with him. You were a victim, not an accomplice." "How can you be so sure?" Leah asked, her voice small. "Because I know what it's like to carry guilt for things beyond your control," Julian said gently. "I spent 20 years blaming myself for Caroline's death, for the Sentinel victims, for pushing away everyone who cared about me. It's a weight no one should have to bear." Leah looked into his eyes, seeing the understanding there. "So what do we do now?" "Now," Julian said, standing and pulling her to her feet. "We start over, together, if that's what you want." Leah felt a surge of emotion. Despite everything, the danger, the revelations, the public scrutiny, her feelings for Julian had only grown stronger. "It is what I want," she said softly. "But can we really move past all this?" "We can try," Julian said, "one day at a time." 2 weeks later, life at the Cade Grand Hotel had returned to a semblance of normalcy. Thomas Reynolds had survived his injuries and was now in custody, facing multiple federal charges for the bombing and conspiracy. The press had largely moved on to other stories after Julian's evidence vindicated him in the Sentinel case. Leah had moved into her new apartment in the residential wing of the hotel and had begun setting up her office in the gallery space. Julian had slowly started to re-emerge into public life, attending business meetings in person rather than virtually, even speaking at a technology conference. and every evening they found time for each other. Dinner in Julian's penthouse or Leah's apartment, walks through Savannah's historic district, quiet conversations about their pasts and tentative plans for the future. On this particular evening, they stood on Julian's terrace, watching the sunset over the city. Olivia had returned to Savannah for a proper visit and had just left after dinner. "Your sister likes me," Leah said, smiling. "She more than likes you," Julian corrected. "She thinks you're the best thing that's happened to me in 20 years. "And what do you think?" Leah asked, suddenly serious. Julian turned to face her. "I think that when you crashed through my door, you also crashed through every wall I'd built around my heart. I think that meeting you woke me up from a 20-year sleepwalk through life." He took her hands in his. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Leah Monroe." Leah's breath caught. They hadn't used that word yet, though it had been hovering unspoken between them for days. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" Julian asked softly. "Because the last time I thought I was in love, I was so wrong." Leah looked down. "I trusted Thomas. I believed in him. What if I'm wrong again?" Julian gently lifted her chin. "We both made mistakes in the past, trusted the wrong people, blamed ourselves for things beyond our control." His eyes held hers. "But we've both learned from those mistakes. We're not the same people we were." "No," Leah agreed. "We're not." Julian drew her closer. "I can't promise it will be easy. We both have scars, fears, habits that might take years to unlearn. But I can promise to try every day to be worthy of your trust, to never take for granted the second chance we've both been given." Tears welled in Leah's eyes. "That's all I can ask for, a chance to try. Together." Julian lowered his head and kissed her. Unlike their first kiss, tentative and questioning, this one was deep and certain, a promise, a beginning. Leah wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling truly safe for the first time in months. The moment was interrupted by Julian's phone ringing. He reluctantly pulled away to answer it. "Yes?" His expression changed, tension returning to his features. "I'll be right down." "What is it?" Leah asked, concerned by his sudden change in demeanor. Julian's eyes met hers, shock evident in them. "It's the front desk. Thomas Reynolds is downstairs, demanding to be let up." His voice dropped to a whisper of disbelief. "And he's asking for me by name." "That's impossible," Leah said, fear clutching at her heart. "Thomas is in federal custody. We just saw the news report this morning." Julian was already moving toward the door. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." "Julian, wait." But he was already gone, the elevator doors closing behind him. Leah stood frozen, her mind racing. How could Thomas be here? Was it a mistake? A different Thomas Reynolds? Or had he somehow escaped custody? Unable to just wait, she went to Julian's office and accessed the security camera feeds on his computer. The lobby camera showed Julian striding across the marble floor toward the front desk, where a man stood with his back to the camera. When the man turned, Leah gasped in shock. It wasn't Thomas. It was David Miller. And as Julian approached, David pulled something from his jacket. Not a weapon, but a folder. His lips moved, saying something that made Julian stop in his tracks. Leah couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Julian's face drain of color as he looked at whatever was in the folder. He said something to David, who nodded grimly, then gestured toward the elevators. Leah quickly exited the security feed and returned to the living room just as the elevator doors opened, revealing Julian and David. "Leah," Julian said, his voice strained, "David has something you need to see." David stepped forward, his expression troubled. "I'm sorry to intrude like this, but after our conversation about Thomas's possible connection to the Sentinel sabotage, I did some digging." He set the folder on the coffee table. "I found this in archives I acquired when my company merged with Secure Vision last year." Leah approached the table cautiously. "What is it?" "Employment records," David said, "from 20 years ago, for a man named Richard Reynolds." "Thomas's father," Leah whispered, the pieces falling into place. David nodded. "Richard Reynolds was fired from Sentinel Technologies 3 months before the sabotage incident. He was suspected of industrial espionage, but there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. And Thomas blamed me for his father's disgrace," Julian said. "He's been planning this for years." David looked grim. "It gets worse. Richard Reynolds committed suicide 6 months after the Sentinel incident. Thomas would have been around 18 at the time." Leah sank onto the sofa, stunned. "So, when he met me, when he pursued me, it was never about you," Julian finished quietly. "It was about getting to me." "But how did he know about my connection to Cade Technologies?" Leah asked. I only photographed secure vision once, years ago. David hesitated. That's the other thing I came to tell you. Thomas Reynolds isn't in federal custody anymore. He was released to psychiatric care this morning due to a judge's order. Apparently he had a complete breakdown after his arrest, revealing details of his plan. What details? Julian demanded. He's been tracking you for years, Julian, gathering information, waiting for an opportunity. When Leah's photography firm was hired to document Secure Vision's headquarters, he arranged to meet her. Their chance encounter was completely orchestrated. Leah felt physically ill. Our entire relationship was based on a lie, a revenge plot against Julian. I'm sorry, David said sincerely. But there's more. Reynolds escaped from the psychiatric facility 2 hours ago. That's why I came directly here instead of calling. I was afraid your phones might be compromised. Julian moved immediately to Leah's side. We need to leave, now. The penthouse isn't safe if he's targeting us specifically. Where can we go? Leah asked, her voice shaking. I have a private property outside the city, Julian said. Off the grid. No one knows about it except Olivia. David nodded. Go. I'll coordinate with security and the police from here. As Julian and Leah quickly gathered essential items, Leah's mind reeled with the revelations. Everything she thought she knew about her relationship with Thomas had been a carefully constructed lie. She had been nothing but a pawn in his twisted game of revenge. Ready? Julian asked, returning with a small bag. Leah nodded, then impulsively moved into his arms. Julian, I'm so sorry. I brought this into your life. Julian held her tightly. You have nothing to apologize for. You were a victim in his scheme just as I was. He pulled back to look into her eyes. But we're not victims anymore. We're survivors, and we'll face this together. As they prepared to leave, Julian's phone rang once more. He answered, his face hardening as he listened. When he hung up, he turned to Leah with a mixture of relief and determination. That was Detective Rivera. They've located Thomas. He's in a standoff with police at his father's old house outside the city. Julian took her hand. It's almost over, Leah. One way or another, it ends tonight. Hours later, as dawn broke over Savannah, Julian and Leah stood together in the penthouse, watching the news report. Thomas Reynolds had been apprehended after a 6-hour standoff. No one had been injured, but documents found in the house had revealed the full extent of his obsession. Years of planning, surveillance notes on Julian, detailed records of his manipulation of Leah. I can't believe it's really over, Leah said, leaning against Julian's side. It is, Julian assured her. Thomas will spend the rest of his life in either prison or a psychiatric facility. He can't hurt us anymore. Leah turned to face him. So, where do we go from here? Julian smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since the latest revelations. Wherever we want. Together. He took her hands in his. I meant what I said before we were interrupted. I'm falling in love with you, Leah. That hasn't changed. Even knowing that I was part of Thomas's plan? That our meeting wasn't really an accident? The crash was real, Julian pointed out. Your exhaustion was real. And everything that's happened between us since has been real. He brushed a curl from her face. Thomas may have orchestrated your arrival in Savannah, but he couldn't have planned what happened next. He couldn't have predicted that two broken people would start to heal each other. Leah smiled through tears. No, he couldn't have. Julian pulled her closer. I spent 20 years frozen in grief and guilt. You woke me up, Leah. Showed me there was still life to be lived, love to be found. His voice deepened with emotion. I don't care how we found each other. I only care that we did. I love you, Julian Cade, Leah whispered, finally allowing herself to feel the full force of her emotions. And I love you, Leah Monroe, Julian replied, lowering his head to kiss her. As their lips met, Julian's phone rang. He ignored it, deepening the kiss instead. But the ringing persisted, finally forcing them apart. You should get that, Leah said, breathless from the kiss. It might be important. Julian sighed and reached for his phone. Yes? He answered impatiently. His expression changed instantly. What? When? He listened intently, his face paling. I'll be right down. What is it? Leah asked, alarmed by his expression. Julian stared at her, shock evident in his eyes. It's the front desk. Thomas Reynolds is downstairs, demanding to be let up. His voice dropped to a whisper. And he knows your name, Leah. He's saying he has unfinished business with both of us. Leah felt her blood run cold. That's impossible. We just saw on the news. The man they arrested wasn't Thomas, Julian cut in. The police discovered it an hour ago. He had a body double, someone who looked enough like him to fool them in the dark. So the real Thomas is... Here, Julian finished grimly. Now, as they stood frozen in shock, the elevator doors to the penthouse suddenly opened. Frank stumbled out, blood streaming from a wound on his head. "He's coming," he gasped, collapsing to the floor. "Reynolds, he has a gun." Julian pulled Leah behind him, facing the elevator as the doors began to close again. In the last moment before they shut completely, they caught a glimpse of a familiar face. Thomas Reynolds, his eyes cold with hatred, a gun in his hand. "Stay with Frank," Julian ordered, moving Leah toward the injured security chief. "Call 911. "What are you going to do?" Leah asked, her voice shaking as she pressed a cloth to Frank's wound. Julian's face was grim with determination. "End this, once and for all." As he moved toward the stairwell door, preparing to confront the man who had orchestrated so much pain in both their lives, Leah called after him. "Julian!" He turned back. "I love you," she said simply. "Come back to me." Julian's expression softened for just a moment. "Always," he promised. Then he was gone, disappearing through the door to face whatever awaited him below. And Leah was left alone in the penthouse, praying that the love they had found amidst so much darkness would survive this final test. The beginning of their story had been an accident, a wrong turn, a moment of exhaustion, a crash through glass doors. But what came next would be a choice, their choice, together.